тоненька, рано вранці поводу Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала. Вийшла дівчинонька, рано вранці воду брать, а за нею козаченько веде коня напувать. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Unites, 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 forever to the future's on.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I am the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1064 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And today, the U.S. woke up and chose violence. They started threatening Russia with an ultimatum today, and we have very big news on that front. Also, North Korea is sending reinforcements for Putin, and also a Russian spy ship was spotted near England, and a UK submarine actually confronted it as well. It's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world as bombshell developments today came out of Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States of America, where the new president of the United States has issued direct ultimatums and threats to the Russian Federation and their continued war in Ukraine, demanding that they make it to the negotiating table and settle the war on amicable terms in light of Western and American interests, or otherwise face economic and military destruction at the hands of the United States and its active involvement in support of Ukraine in the war effort. We've also been able to hear of some significant news as well happening around the area of the British coastline, as we've been able to see that a Russian spy ship attempting to map underwater infrastructure of the United Kingdom and the surrounding area was intercepted today by the Royal Navy and forcibly run from Britain's waters by a Royal Navy nuclear-powered submarine. We were also able to get additional information as well that the NATO operations, Baltic Sentry, within the Baltic region are well underway at this point. We've been able to get more pictures and videos from NATO showing the operation as it's continuing inside of the Baltic. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear that within the area of the Russian Federation, manpower shortages are continuing to grip the country, and with the prospect of the war going on a good bit longer than it already is, considering that the Russian Federation will not be coming to the negotiating table, at least from what we're seeing right now based off the Russian public's reaction, it appears that the Russian Federation has made a request to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to provide additional reinforcements, which has been granted by Kim Jong-un, the leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or the DPRK, and we've already been able to see see that reinforcements are moving into the Russian Federation in the thousands, along with additional Koksan SPGs, which are already within the area of Western Russia and will be delivered to the frontline units here very soon. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians have been able to conduct some very significant deep strikes on the Russian Federation, with the Tupolev plant within the northeastern area of the city of Kazan being stricken overnight, with their major fuel reserves that keep their deliveries delivered largely burning to the ground. It appears that they will not be able to deliver any of their aircraft that they are producing in limited numbers at the Tupolev assembly halls at this time. However, there has also been some other interesting news from around the area, well, specifically inside the area of the Middle East and the Far East. As we have been able to hear today, very impressive news from the United States of America's government, as we have been able to hear that the office of the president has declared that the Yemeni Houthis are now a terrorist organization by default, and that U.S. forces will be taking hostile action imminently against Yemeni Houthi forces within the area of Western Yemen, and finally putting an end to their reign of terror over the major population areas of the town or the cities of Western Yemen, and also once again reopening the trade routes through the southern Red Sea, a vital link for the entirety of the world and major global trade connections that continue to benefit the United States and the Western world economically. We have also been able to hear that the United States made an official request for the Afghans to return the $7 billion of equipment that was abandoned inside of Afghanistan during 2021. That was, of course, denied, and we do not believe that there will be any more follow-ups on that kind of information, at least at the moment. But moving on from the Middle East, we have also been able to hear around the area of Poland that we have been able to see that another American 747 carrying military equipment has landed into the area of Rezhau. I know I'm mispronouncing that. I'm sorry. I just cannot unpronounce that. But beyond that, we have been able to see that the 747 has landed and is continuing to provide aid from the United States government. And we were also able to hear official confirmation today from Washington that Israel and Ukraine were exempted from the 90-day funding freeze to international projects. A major bombshell to have confirmation on, and once again showing that the United States will continue to support its national prerogatives in every corner of the globe, including Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia as well, although we do not have information at this time as to whether Taiwan was affected from the funding freeze yet at this point. However, there is also major news to be talked about inside of Ukraine itself, as we have been able to see that Ukrainian armed forces have continued their heroic stands against the Russian Federation, inflicting significant losses on the Russian forces, and once again, largely holding their lines. It appears that the Russian Federation, at this point in the war, is unable to conduct major offensive victories or successes on the battlefield, and once again, this will be compounding Russian desperation, aligned with the United States' direct ultimatums and threats issued to the Russian government today to try and find a way to put themselves in a superior negotiating position, or to try and win the war, which is largely at this point practically impossible for the Russian Federation. Victory is close within grasp for the Western world. But moving on from that and into the major news of today, we have to move over to Washington, D.C., because this is where everything has started today. Largely the beginning of everything you'll be seeing around the world happened today inside of Washington, D.C. One of the few times that we've actually covered the news in this form, starting from the capital of the United States and then moving on outwards. And the news was huge. I can't even make any bars about it. The news that we were getting outside of Washington, D.C. today was significant. We were able to hear that the United States has threatened the Russian Federation, and here are largely the bullet points that we have from the ultimatum or the threat that was issued, along with everything else that happened today as an extension of that as well. We were able to hear that the status update on new U.S. administration plans to end the Ukraine war were as follows. Heavy Russian sanctions are imminent if Putin doesn't negotiate in good faith. That is reliant on whether he even makes it to the negotiating table, which is yet to be seen. Zelensky has also demanded, as a really an add-on to the U.S. ultimatum, that Russia needs to withdraw to its pre-invasion 2022 borders before the negotiations. The United States has also publicly accused the People's Republic of China of being complicit in failing to stop the Russian war in Ukraine, and the United States is maintaining current arms shipments to Ukraine, and there has been the statement that they will increase arms shipments as well if the Russian Federation continues the war outside of the United States' wishes. We have also been able to already ascertain that the Russians will not be backing down. We will be getting into that information a little bit later, but I do want to move y'all into something that is a little bit interesting, at least at the moment. I do want to make sure before we move on to the big piece, though, that we do outline that the president's executive order, which paused all further foreign aid for at least 90 days, will not apply to Israel or Ukraine, and that confirmation did come from multiple government offices today, confirming that Ukraine and Israel are completely unaffected by the foreign funding freeze, meaning that we will be continuing to support Ukraine and Israel in the foreseeable future without any pause or delay because of the foreign funding freeze. However, I do want to bring y'all to something that we did not show in the short war video of today that is very important to mention, because a lot of people in the short war video said, oh, it sounds like you're getting everything wrong about what the president said. And so I'm actually going to be taking y'all to the direct post made by the president that we took all of this information from. But before we get to it, I do have to make sure to remind everyone that the Enforcer channel is not a politically affiliated channel. We do not lean towards either direction of the political aisle, and we are remaining strictly politically neutral. However, there is a large amount of information to be acquired from this statement that was made on social media today by the President of the United States, and largely is the only public statement that has been made to the Russian Federation so far on what the war in Ukraine will turn into if they do not really relent and move towards the negotiating table and actually negotiate on positive terms. I do want to remind everyone that's the reason why this post is being shown. We're not delving into the political world. We're simply reading what the U.S. foreign policy stance is at the moment, because this is the statement from the now President of the United States. So moving on into that, we are going to be reading it directly. So this is the statement in its entirety. If you have not seen it today, here it is. But we are going to be reading it word for word. We're going to, of course, make sure to dissect it as best we can and explain what was really being said. I'm not looking to hurt Russia, stated the president. I love the Russian people and always had a very good relationship with President Putin. And this is despite there was a political statement there which is omitted. We must never forget that Russia helped us to win the Second World War, which the Russians believe that they won the Second World War and America was just kind of there. So that is most likely going to piss all the Russians off, including Putin, because Putin's got this delusional mindset that America had nothing to do with winning the war, losing almost 60 million lives in the process. All of that being said, I'm going to do Russia, whose economy is failing, and President Putin a very big favor. Settle now and stop this ridiculous war. It's only going to get worse. This is where the threat comes in. If we don't make a deal, and soon, I have no other choice but to put high levels of taxes, tariffs, and sanctions on anything being sold by Russia to the United States and various other participating countries. Let's get this war, which never would have started if I were president, which is a dubious claim to be entirely honest, over with. We can do it the easy way or the hard way. The choice is yours. And the easy way is always better. It's time to make a deal. So largely,
man, that statement right there about Russia helping the United States win the Second World War, that one right there is going to piss Putin off to the core, because you know how Putin went on that really long tirade with Tucker Carlson trying to explain the whole history of how Russia's been great, they've saved the world and things like this over and over and over again. That statement in particular is going to be probably blasted all over Russian state media, and Putin's going to have to publicly make himself look like a strongman over it and try to refute that. So that's going to be a doozy right there.
It's going to be a doozy. So let's break down a couple of things in it that will be important to largely gather moving forward. One, this is largely pissing on the Russians as far as they view history. Just to let y'all know, the Russians don't even call World War II World War II. The Russian Federation actually calls World War II the Great Patriotic War, where it was a battle of survival against the Axis forces of evil, the Nazi Germans, against the beautiful and righteous Soviet peoples and their determination to survive. That's how they view the war. And the war was incredibly costly for the Russian Federation. The number of 60 million is a little bit high. That's actually the high-end estimate of how many Soviets were killed over the course of World War II. It's somewhere in between 30 to 60 million, though. We actually don't know the exact number because the Soviet Union really didn't keep good numbers on that, and for good reason. It wouldn't be good for the public to know that around 30 or 60 million of them ended up getting killed over the course of the war. So the number is a good guesswork and has a large amount of error in it, about 30 million, give or take. But nevertheless, this is the American view of the Second World War, not the Russian view. So to say that the Russians helped the United States to win is a huge insult to the Russians, because they believe that they're the only people who won World War II. Everyone else was just kind of watching them do it, and the U.S., Britain, the British Raj, or anyone else for that matter, Free France, had nothing to do with winning the war. They were just there. So that will probably piss off the Russian Federation incredibly, and also that will probably put Putin in a position where he has to turn down any kind of initial peace negotiations, because if he did, it would show that he is admitting that the Russians were only kind of tagging along with the United States winning the war and not winning the war outright like they say in Russia. Another thing is, skipping beyond, of course, some of the political rhetoric that is seen in this, which we don't talk about, is the direct threat. This is probably the part that is going to lead to unforeseen consequences, because we actually did not expect that there would be a direct threat ever made to the Russian Federation. But this is about as direct a threat that we've ever seen so far. And there's also been additional statements made in the background that the United States will militarily support Ukraine even farther if a peace deal is not reached soon. It may even be more support than we've seen in the past. But saying it's only going to get worse in all caps, and then saying that the United States is going to practically economically obliterate the Russian Federation, along with the subtitled in the background that we've been hearing, additional military support of greater numbers and of more advanced types, this is a direct threat to the Russian Federation. And we do know that the Russian Federation has not really dealt with even the soft actions previously, which were good and concerted actions, but an aggressive approach like this may even push them even farther into just trying to continue the war on a position of not really merit, but more so on a position of principle. The Russian Federation...
Also, by the way, you might have caught there that last part of the sentence. It said they're also going to sanction and also put tariffs on various other participating countries. He specifically made a statement aimed at China today, saying they were complicit in the war and they could be doing much more to put an end to the Ukraine war. And he believes that China has not been playing enough of a part to put a stop to it. So he's actually threatening China in the same statement as well, along with Putin's regime as well. So there's actually multiple people here getting threatened, including China.
It sounds as though many people are being threatened over this today. There's many overt threats that have been made so far, and it's going to be interesting how this largely unfolds. Some of y'all might be able to hear the smile in my voice right now, because it is really something to think that the United States went from openly supporting Ukraine, and the Russians were pissed about it. Now we're moving to openly threatening Ukraine, and I don't even know what the Russian reaction to this is going to be, but it cannot be well, because we're already seeing that the Russian military bloggers are going mental over these specific statements made over social media today by the President of the United States. So moving us on over into Moscow really quickly before we get on into the rest of the news that we were able to hear in the Baltic and also in the North Sea today, the Russian military bloggers are going mental. I mean, they're literally losing their minds, and this was a statement from one Russian military blogger that appears to have also gotten some traction where they originally posted it on Telegram. But nevertheless, this is what they said. On the Truth Social Network, the American president called on the Russian president to end the Ukrainian conflict immediately, stating that it will only get worse, including threatening to introduce new sanctions and duties. How should we react to this? Bow your head and say, yes, yes, of course. We're already running. We'll withdraw the troops now. Sorry, we won't do it anymore? F him. This president and his whole team. This is the only correct and adequate approach, strictly in the style of the traditions of Russian diplomacy. And boy,
geez, I bet that sentiment right there is probably pervading through the entire Russian military, I'd imagine at this point, because to get threatened like that after, of course, remember, even though Russia's in the wrong, they've taken extremely large losses. A lot of people lost and a lot of family members losing loved ones in the middle of this. So to hear themselves getting threatened by America all of a sudden, which was really honestly out of the blue, I wasn't expecting it either. Today was just like, wake up and choose violence type of day for the Americans. But literally, they're threatening them, and the Russians are not going to react good to this. They're already showing it right here in this post. They're going to go berserk, and Putin's going to have to sort of mirror that to make sure he can maintain control over them.
And I would have to say, I believe that's going to largely be the case. It doesn't look like anyone in the Russian Federation has received this well today, and I'm honestly just getting a huge laugh out of all this, because the interesting, many of y'all will know that this was how things were going beforehand, and we have been talking about this for a year, and it looks like we were right on the money. It was done by the book, exactly as we said it was going to be. The incoming president, well, the current president right now, while he was running for election, was saying that the war in Ukraine was terrible and the war would have to end. And a lot of people took that as we were going to appease the Russians and just give up. And of course, here on this channel, we were saying that that just wouldn't make any sense. No matter who's going to get elected, they're going to continue to support Ukraine, probably even more adamantly than the prior president, for the fact that they're going to be trying to round this thing out and claim a victory for their administration. So we said that that was going to be obvious. That was just simply a national prerogative. There's really no choice. The United States must see the war in Ukraine through to its conclusion, conclusion, and it must conclude in an American strategic victory or a Western strategic victory. Many people doubted us. Many people have said nasty things to Enforcer Matt and me about those claims and those statements. But then we started to hear leading up to the new president taking office that he was working in conjunction with the prior president, who already was very hostile towards the Russian Federation, to start cooking up an even more hostile approach to the Russian Federation. And a lot of people did not believe that, because a lot of people said, well, there's just no way, because this whole idea that the enforcers were putting out of a national prerogative is just nonsense. No one ever cares about national prerogatives or concerns. People just throw that kind of stuff out the window and to the wind. And so finally, the new president was inaugurated yesterday. The prior president, literally in their final days, was still pushing out as much support to Ukraine as could be possible. The new president has come in. There is as much military support flowing to Ukraine as there was before. And now today, for some reason, the new president woke up and chose violence and is now openly threatening the Russian Federation, which we've never seen before, mind you, to end the war, or else they are going to destroy the United States, is going to directly destroy the Russian economy and, in a sense, the military through our increased military support, and also damning sanctions that will be imposed on them if they do not come to the negotiating table. It went
also, there's nothing that Russia can do at this point to save their economy. Like, even if they decided to work with the United States and end the war and, you know, fulfill all the demands that we have, like, for example, if we ask them to return to their pre-invasion borders, then if they do that, that's not going to save their economy. Like, their economy is already going down the tubes right now, and the plan's already in motion to put their economy basically 6 feet under. So yeah, I think at this point, I think Putin kind of knows it's over for the Russian Federation when it comes to their whole like economic growth. That's finished. So at this point, all they're trying to do is save face in Ukraine or try to keep taking more land in Ukraine. I think Putin will take that option. He'll probably say, let's just go for it. Put the gas on the car basically, and let's go as fast as we can, see what we can take. That's probably what he's going to sort of approach this like.
Man, and I got to tell you, man, it's very interesting to see what's happening so far. It's going to be even more interesting to see how this goes. Many of y'all know that this is new territory, and I want to make this very clear. I was actually quite happy, just speaking on the foreign policy side of things, not speaking domestically. I was fairly happy to see that the prior president was continuing the approach of providing Ukraine with support and equipment to be able to fight the Russian Federation and eventually grind them down into some sort of a peace negotiation. That was a very good approach. It appears that the prior president and this president, much like we were talking about last night, simply passed the baton on to the new president, and the new president's now taking it and running to the finish. So if it wasn't for both presidencies, it appears that this wouldn't have been possible to make it to this point. But still, it's looking as though things are actually going to be turning out fairly interestingly. I can't say if it's going to be good or not. We don't know what the consequences of a direct threat to the Russian Federation like this would be, especially considering that we're already hearing that it appears that they're massing troops in Kaliningrad and within the Leningrad military, well, really just within the Leningrad military district, because Kaliningrad is a part of it, possibly for some sort of a conventional war with NATO. We don't really know how this is going to turn out, but it sure as hell is really a change, to say the least, and I'm fairly interested to see how this is going to go. But this is the first time I've ever seen anyone just literally just crap on the Russians during the entirety of the war from the U.S. government. The U.S. government has usually been fairly reserved so far because, of course, there is a lot at play here. And while there is some concern to be had about not considering everything at play and just crapping on the Russians outright in a public statement, it is still nice to see that a actual public statement is being made where the United States makes it fairly clear that we'll crush the Russians if they don't adhere to our demands. Whether that'll end up being that easy or not, that'll be another picture, another case, but still fairly interesting to see. Also, once again, I gotta say, there is no politics in the chat. Of course, we're speaking about what the United States is doing today, and while this president, or really the last president and this president, of course, are politically polarizing people, they are the president of the United States, both of them during their time. The last president up until just a few days ago, and now the current president from now up until the next 4 years. Of course, this channel doesn't really make any discernments in between political affiliations of presidents. We simply support the president that is in charge. We supported the last president, we support the current president. We are going to be supporting every president because those presidents were elected by the people, by a majority majority vote across the United States, and for that reason, they represent the wills and the wishes of the citizenry of the Republic. And for this reason, we do not go out of our way to largely say whether we agree or disagree with really anything that they're doing. We are simply telling y'all what they are doing, in this instance, what was directly said by a president, and what the consequences may be on the foreign policy field on those results, or really those statements. But still, beyond that, I do have to say that we have a very interesting question at the moment, and a very interesting one indeed, because it's largely asking about what we've been talking about, because the United States has threatened Putin with sanctions, and if he doesn't negotiate fairly, things are going to get worse. And how will Putin receive this information? And it looks like everyone's saying that he's going to get hostile with the United States of America. I'm sorry that I'm laughing through this whole thing. I just think it's hilarious that someone actually just crapped on Putin. Like, it's the first time it's happened, Matthew. I'm getting a huge kick out of even talking about this, and it happened publicly.
Fascinating.
It's fascinating, that's for sure, and it's honestly hilarious at this point. But a lot of people are saying that Putin's going to be pissed, royally pissed at the United States, and that he's going to be trying to exact some sort of a hostile policy towards the United States openly at this point, like that hasn't already happened. Others are saying that he's going to back down and give in, but that's a very small group of people. Others are saying that this is confusing and they need more info, and some are saying that they're a little unsure and undecided at this point. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so 68% of the audience said he is going to get hostile with the USA, meaning Putin's going to get hostile, while 15% said Putin is going to back down and give in, and 7% said this is confusing and I need more info. And I will say this to sort of like preface what I'm going to say. The strategy here is a little bit fleeting to me. I'm not really sure what the overall strategy actually is. I will say it's good to hear that there are statements being made toward Russia to let them know that they are not in the driver's seat. But at the same time, that ultimatum will put Putin in a position where he must respond, or otherwise he'll look like he's weak. And inside of Russia, he basically has this whole image of being a strongman. And if he's not viewed as a strongman, he could start having some problems holding his power inside of Russia. So that could force Putin to act, which could be a bad thing. But at the same time, I'm glad to see that we are actually putting our foot down, which is a good thing to see. And I think Putin probably will get hostile in the short term with the United States. And he might let it go over time, but only time's going to tell with that one. But immediately speaking, Putin's going to have to respond to sort of save face, because right now he looks like he just got punked. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, I'm not going to lie, man. I had to go find a reaction picture to kind of show what I'm feeling like right now. It's this.
Oh, what the hell? I've never seen that before. That's crazy.
Man, honestly, I'm kind of feeling like that at this point, because I'll be honest with you, I'm agreeing with the 68%. I don't think Putin is going to be responding well to this. If this is the foreign policy approach, we're probably going to be seeing that this war actually continues on, and there's not even an attempt at a peace talk that's going to be happening soon. The Russians are a very interesting group. They don't like it when people are soft to them, and they also don't like it when people are being tough on them, to be entirely frank with y'all. So the soft, they're kind of like the North Koreans, to be entirely honest with y'all. It doesn't really matter what we do, they're going to be pissed off at us no matter what. So in the last administration, the policy was, they're not going to get what they want, but we're also not going to directly shit in their faces. Now we're saying they're not going to get what they want, and we're also going to shit in their faces. So really the only thing that's going to be changing is the Russian position towards the United States, which already is highly unfriendly. They're most likely going to move towards being hostile. Once again, if anyone is a United States citizen watching this channel that was thinking about traveling to the Russian Federation, it already is not advised to travel to the Russian Federation under the Department of State. I would highly suggest from this point forward that that is adhered to by the letter, because the Russian Federation will probably be looking to take out their anger at the United States on any American citizen inside the Russian Federation. But at this point, I do believe that the large majority of everyone is correct. The Russians are only going to get more hostile about this, but it doesn't even look like they're really making any ground with that. Like, today is just hilarious. Like, I'm not gonna lie, y'all probably gonna hear I'm laughing through the whole thing, because they're not making any ground anywhere. I mean, if they are pissed, they got shat on today, not just from America, they also got shat on from the UK. So let's move on into that news. Because
also real quick, Enforcer, before we move on, one thing I was wondering, I've seen some people bring this up in the chat over here, is what brought this on? Like, for example, like, it was a very drastic change here with this statement. Like, yesterday, I was getting the impression that maybe Ukraine was going to have to be giving in quite a bit to sort of satisfy the U.S. position. But today, literally this morning, it seems to have taken a complete 180, and it's turned into USA enacting violence on Russia, which is a hell of a change over just the course of 24 24 hours. So do you think maybe something is happening in the background? Maybe there are already preliminary talks going on, and sort of the signal was kind of sent to the USA that Putin is not going to negotiate fairly. So this was like the result or the sort of like the counteracting of that?
I'll tell you what's going on, but it requires me to talk about someone beyond the 1960s no political or no politics rule. But I'm going to waive it just this one time. I'm not saying I like or dislike this guy, but I'm going to tell you what he did, because I'm not going to lie, this is exactly what the current president is now doing. There was once a president, many people will know him because he talked in a certain way, named Richard Nixon, who was a president of the United States during the late 1960s and early 1970s. He was brought in as the president towards the latter end of Vietnam, and it was made very clear at that point that public support for the war in Vietnam was just not really there, and that the war needed to end. So what did Nixon do? He said, and I want to make this clear, we're not speaking about this whether we like it or not, I'm just explaining to y'all what happened. Nixon, in his election, or largely the 1972 election, said that he doesn't like the war in Vietnam. We need peace. Americans are dying in Vietnam. Vietnamese are dying every day. War is a terrible thing. We need to end it now. And he got elected in a landslide, by the way, in 1972. Also, that may have been from the whole Watergate thing, but we're not touching that. But beyond that, he ended up winning in an absolute landslide. So, as the president, from that point forward, he did this thing called bombing the hell out of everyone. He bombed North Vietnam. He also bombed Laos and Cambodia into oblivion. And the whole entire plan behind this was a peace through strength initiative. So basically the concept was, if we bomb them enough and we end up obliterating enough of the North Vietnamese, they will eventually take the peace negotiations seriously. Otherwise, we'll just keep bombing them into the Stone Age. So the North Vietnamese, interestingly enough, actually took the bombings quite seriously and ended up going to the Paris Peace Accords and signing a deal, at least at the time, that will allow the United States to leave and keep the situation in Vietnam fairly stable. Of course, all of y'all know in retrospect that around a year and a half after the Paris Peace Accords of 1973, the North Vietnamese would invade South Vietnam and South Vietnam would fall, and Vietnam would be unified under the communist banner. But nevertheless, at least at that time, that policy worked incredibly well. Bombing the North Vietnamese into submission was just the way to go. And a lot of people were really shocked by that because initially in the campaign, Nixon looked to be the peace bringer. You know, the kind of guy who would throw up the peace sign or something like that and say war is bad. And then he went on to largely conduct the bloodiest phase of the Vietnam War that had been seen so far. And he was publicly the one the most against it. This seems to be the same thing that happened with what the current president was saying beforehand. It was literally I would largely say the Nixon Vietnam approach. It was that war is bad, we need to end it, and then the truth behind that is, to end it, we're going to bomb the Russians into oblivion and destroy them economically to where they'll come to the negotiating table. Pretty much meaning we're going to smoke them. So that's what basically all of this boils down to. There really isn't a change. This probably was the plan the entire time, because this was the plan that Nixon had the entire time he was running for re-election on the idea of bringing the war in Vietnam to an end. So I would say it's largely the same thing as far as the foreign policy approaches that were given then and are being given now at this point.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, at least he wasn't a coward, I guess you could say, about Nixon. He was not a coward because he went in there doing that crazy stuff. But in the end, though, didn't Vietnam really not end up well, though?
Well, technically, when the U.S. withdrew, it was fairly well. The Paris Peace Accords were pretty decent. And this is kind of getting into the whole politics thing, but I'll kind of cover it a little bit. Interestingly enough, the Soviet Union and really all of the communist bloc countries respected Nixon a considerable deal because he had actually had a lot of dealings with the Soviet Union and the Chinese during his time as president. He was the one who actually opened up American-Chinese relations, so the Chinese respected him fairly considerably for that. And also, as vice president under Eisenhower, which is actually under our no politics rule because that's far enough back, he actually traveled through the Soviet Union considerably, practically through all of the Union members of the Soviet Union and some of the Warsaw Pact countries as well. And he was able to familiarize himself a lot with the nuances of really communist politics and Soviet influence within the region. And he also knew that the strongman approach was the approach that the Soviets respected the most. Brezhnev feared him. Like, Brezhnev actually said that he feared feared Nixon after he left. The Chinese said that they respected Nixon. So largely all of the communists respected him. And a lot of them actually respected him because he bombed the shit out of Vietnam, because it looked like he was a madman. So when the Paris Peace Accords were written, it actually was a pretty decent deal. But people say that after he resigned from the office and the vice president, Gerald R. Ford, became president, that none of the communist bloc countries really supported or really respected Gerald R. Ford the same way. It's the same party, so I guess it doesn't really matter if I talk about this. And for that reason, that's why the North Vietnamese violated the Paris Peace Accords and then invaded South Vietnam and took it over. That's largely what the explanation is, at least in the present day, or at least the argument as to whether or not they would have done that if Nixon was still president or not. But beyond that, that's largely kind of like the discussion that surrounds that, at least in the modern day.
Interesting. Well, that's fascinating to know that history.
And so with that, once again, I want to make it clear that we're not getting into politics there, just trying to use a historical instant from recent times that pertains to the Cold War, which largely is within our no politics rule, to explain what's happening in the present day. But if you look at that and you research it a lot, and I highly recommend that a lot of y'all do, the parallels are identical. It's literally almost the same approach. So with that in mind, I have a feeling that the Russian Federation, much like the North Vietnamese did historically, are going to completely ignore the demand to make peace or else, and then they're going to find out what the or else is, which was inevitable at this point. They were going to do that no matter who was in charge, to be entirely honest with you all. Whether it was this guy or the other candidate in the last election, this was most likely the way it was going to go. So with that, it is now time for us to move on to the Russians being pissed. And the Russians are pissed, royally pissed, and they already know that they're not going to be taking this whole peace negotiation thing seriously. It's just a given fact. And so the Russians went to go and cash in their North Korean debit card at the ATM. But there was a small issue. They've run out of North Koreans. So many of them have been killed on the front lines in Kursk that largely about 40% of their combat power has now been wiped out in about less than 3 weeks to a month. So the Russians need to recharge the card, and that's an issue. So they went to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and they have now requested that they send further reinforcements to the Russian Federation to help them to continue the war effort, possibly through the foreseeable future, considering that peace negotiations are going to fall apart, and they are still looking at trying to hang in the conflict in the long term. The North Koreans have obliged the request and are going to be sending additional reinforcements, which, according to information that the Pentagon has been able to get from their intelligence sources, will most likely arrive within the next 2 months. At this moment, we do not know the specific size and scale of the new Korean reinforcements that are going to be sent, but it does appear that the Russian North Korean soldier debit card has been refilled, and they are able to use it just a little bit further. But we've also been able to see that additional support from North Korea in forms of material support is still arriving, as more 170mm Koksan SPGs are still being seen transported by rail from North Korea and into the western areas of the Russian Federation to be able to continue the Russian war effort within this area and to continue to be able to supplement the attrition rate that the Russian Federation is largely facing right now in the longer range artillery categories. The Russians still, however, want to flex their muscle a little bit more. And so they usually pick who they believe to be the weaker people of the Western world. And who are those weaker people that the Russians, we're not saying they're weaker, but who do the Russians believe are the weaker people? Well, generally, the British and the French are, crazily enough, well, really the Germans, the British, and the French, are really Russia's #1 targets. For some reason, they always think that the British, the French, and the Germans are just weak, and they won't do anything to really mess with the Russian Federation, so they can kind of bully them to get back at the United States and really the entirety of the Western world, because they aren't going to do anything. They learned that that's not the case today, because 45 miles off the coast of Britain, somewhere around the southeastern end of England, or really towards the area of the Norwich region, we were able to see, and this was just the craziest thing, that a Russian spy ship was spotted. And there it is right there. You can actually see the British vessel that responded, and it's just such a difference, Matthew, honestly, in between the Royal Navy's abilities and the Russian Navy's abilities, because this is a Russian spy ship. This is somewhat close to the British equivalent of the same thing. Modern, sleek, and refined, versus the Russians still using like a 1970s fishing trawler that you would see on like Whale Wars or something like that.
Yeah, it really does. It looks like a fishing boat with like some radars put on top of it or something. It looks kind of rinky-dink. Also, hasn't this exact boat been spotted around like the Baltic states too? Like it looks like the same boat.
It has been. And interestingly enough, the British have given a little bit more information about this vessel. This vessel is not your normal kind of a spy ship. It actually is one that has a special relay on the bottom of the vessel that allows them to map the ocean floor very accurately. And not only that, if they sit idly in specific areas, they can actually map out specific infrastructure systems on the bottom of the ocean floor. So cables, oil pumping stations, pipelines, electrical grids, you name it. They can map all of that from this vessel. So having it around British waters is a serious concern to national infrastructure concerns. The British began to shadow the vessel with a frigate over the course of the entire day. But this wasn't enough to stop the Russian spy ship from leaving. They could see this threat, and they could largely understand that it wasn't going to be that big of a concern, because once again, the Russians just believe the British are nothing to be scared of. It's not like the Royal Navy has one of the most long and illustrious histories of any navy around the world. Or, for that matter, it's not like it's a really modern and scary navy. I mean, there's a million people out there that tell you that the British are just pushovers. There's just nothing that the British could ever do to really scare us away from their waters. Then the HMS Vanguard apparently showed up, surfaced right next to the vessel, which is this submarine right here, and it scared the Russian spy ship so badly, it actually left. Like, the arrival of this submarine scared them to death. This is a nuclear-powered submarine, mind you all. I want to remind everyone of that. That also carries a considerable portion of Britain's nuclear arsenal with it. So the arrival of this submarine close to, well, actually within British exclusive economic zone waters was enough to scare the crap out of the spy ship and send it running into the North Sea. So I guess that while the Russians were like, America's acting big balls these days, let's go bully the British. Then they found out that the British aren't really ones to be bullied anymore, and it looks like they're also starting to whip out the fine China. I don't really know why the Russians always act like the Germans, the British, and the French are weak links. This is like, honestly, the French these days are just raring to go into Ukraine. The British were the first to pretty much support Ukraine with every category of equipment outside of aircraft, like beat the United States and everyone else to the punch. And not only that, the British have made it very clear that they're beginning to start putting a lot more funds into remilitarization because of the Russian threat. So I don't know why the Russians always had this mindset that the British are something to easily sweep aside and kind of bully, because it's like, I think that the spy ship today learned that's not the case. They had an entire nuclear-powered and nuclear-armed submarine show up right next to the spy ship to run it out of the waters, and we were able to get confirmation about that.
Yeah, how close was it that they serviced to it? Because it sounds like they must have, like, literally popped up right next to it to scare them off that quick.
Apparently, it was within visual distance at somewhat closer range, so I'd assume that it was less than a mile away.
Yeah, it must have been super close.
Man, that must have scared the hell out of it, because he probably didn't know that they were being shadowed by a nuclear submarine, and then the thing just surfaces about a mile away. That had to have scared the death out of him, man.
It would seem to be, if it was a Russian spy ship, that they would have some type of equipment to detect a submarine nearby, but I guess that they didn't see it. I guess they were blind to it.
No, these spy ships aren't equipped like that. For those spy ships to be able to detect a vessel like that, they would have to have a passive sonar or an active sonar system on board and have it on. And usually those vessels are not outfitted with those kinds of sensors because it's incredibly expensive. And not only that, if that country didn't know it was a spy ship, if you hear active sonar pings coming from a normal looking vessel, it really kind of gives away that that thing is not a normal vessel just wandering around. But they already kind of knew that this one was a spy ship. Everyone kind of knows that this specific one was a spy ship. But still, it's nice to see that the Royal Navy is flexing those good old naval traditions on the Russians and reminding them who really is the ruler of the waves. It isn't the Russians, it's the British. But moving on from that, and out of that nice news today, where the British got to piss on the Russians just a little bit extra to add salt to the wound that was already opened this morning by the United States choosing violence, we were then able to hear that more interesting things were happening in the Baltic, as Operation Baltic Sentry is still underway, and NATO put out some incredibly good-looking pictures. Just wonderful pictures, mind you, of the multinational fleet that is within this area. But before we get into that, I do want to make sure to ask y'all about one more thing. Do y'all think tensions between Russia and the United States are going to escalate dramatically in the coming months? And it looks like everyone's saying yes. So Matthew, what is everyone saying about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So about 66% of the audience said yes, Russia and the USA is about to get very heated, while 20% said somewhat, but really only in words only. And 9% said no, things will remain status quo. And I can guarantee you that after today's statement, things are not going to stay status quo. It's probably going to get heated, at least in the short term. Now, the long term is another question. It maybe be that maybe the US and Russia sort of smooths things out a little bit, and they try to go back to somewhat status quo. But now that the ultimatum has been issued, things are not going to go back to being super peaceful probably ever again until this war comes to a conclusion. So I'm not really sure what Putin's going to do here, but he will do something, and he probably will actually lash out against some NATO state or somebody doing something stupid. Not necessarily starting a war with NATO right off the bat, but he might try to do something stupid to make a point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it's probably going to escalate a good bit. I would have to agree with the 66%. But to what extent, I don't really know. If we start to implement damning sanctions on the Russians and also provide even further military support to Ukraine, I don't know what the Russians really could do at this point to respond to the United States, because they've kind of done about everything that they can so far outside of a direct war. So I would be kind of on the level of I don't really know what they could do. It's not really like the Russians have a lot to work with, and they certainly don't have a lot to work with now after being weakened so heavily under the prior presidency. So I would have to say, however this is going, I have no clue, but I have a feeling that relations are going to be considerably decreasing here in the near future. But that's nothing to really be complaining about too much, because it's not really like there's a relationship to be had with the Russians at any point in history. But moving on from that, we do have some nice pictures of Operation Baltic Sentry as it's ongoing right now inside the Baltic. Many of y'all will know that that was undertaken about a week ago under the prior presidency, where a multinational coalition of ships from practically most nations that make up NATO entered the Baltic and are now conducting an operation to protect strategic infrastructure at the bottom of the Baltic Sea from Russian sabotage. And we got probably some of the hardest pictures of the year that came out from this operation, like this one right here.
Oh man, that picture goes so hard right there. Almost looks like AI. Like it looks like the aircraft were like edited in or something.
Man, crazily enough, they're not edited in. This is a real picture that was taken by NATO. Like it's
also by the way, what's this ship called now? The one right here on the ocean.
This one is called let's see, HLY. It's a Dutch I guess you could say call sign, like USS. This is the Dutch version, but it's called the HNLMS Trump.
Interesting. Somebody just pulled up, I guess. The ship pulled up.
Man, when this ship tries to impound a Russian ship, they say, "Turn off your engines, pull alongside." like we're gonna get your ass now, boy. But beyond that, beautiful picture, beautiful Dutch frigate that's down there in the Baltic. I really do have to say, please do pull up the Dutch Navy. It's a small navy, but they do have some of the most modern-looking vessels, I would say, in the Western world at this point, in the Dutch Navy. It's just incredible across the board, especially with their larger vessels like their frigates. But still, we were able to see another picture of largely the Dutch-German part of the coalition that entered into the area. We were able to see the Trump again in the background, and also the Leums, which is a form of an auxiliary of a sort, and also a small German minesweeper that literally just set off from the German ports on the eastern side of the country and straight into the Baltic. But there are the two Norwegian F-35s again, and what a beautiful sight, man. The Russians could not replicate something like this, even with the smaller vessels that are on display here.
Man, they just can't pull it off. Like one thing about the West is we have the best equipment in the world. We also have the best trained soldiers in the world as well. So you know that's got to be intimidating to Putin, and that leaves him basically with, guess what, the nuclear threats once again. That's what that leaves him with, because he knows he can't go up against the whole of NATO, because pretty much nobody can. It's a very powerful alliance, and that's why it's so important to keep it running like that. So yeah, man, it's impressive to see it every time.
And I gotta say this really quickly. I want to show y'all some of the vessels that the Dutch Navy has, because I gotta tell y'all, I'm just a huge fan of the Dutch Navy. Like, it's a small navy. It only consists of a handful of vessels, but it's still a really, really cool one. So this is the De Zeven Provincen class, which is the one that y'all saw in the picture, which is the Trump that y'all saw. This is the one. These things are just really clean looking. I just love them. They have very nice, sleek lines. They're streamlined. You know, it's just just great. I mean, these things look incredible. I think the Dutch have some of the best frigates out there. But also, what's really cool is that they have an ocean patrol vessel called the Holland class, which, in my opinion, has to be one of the best looking patrol class vessels or corvettes out there. Like it's just like good.
Man, I like that paint job too. It's like almost like a Arctic white color or something like that. That's pretty clean looking. I like that one.
Man, it is just, oh, it is like perfect. Again, I'm not gonna lie. The Dutch Navy does naval-like things with the aesthetic side just way too good. It's just incredibly good. Got to give a huge shout out to all of our Dutch viewers. Y'all probably have the most beautiful looking navy out there. It's not a big one, but it's really rich in quality, like no joke at all. And then they also have the Carl Dorman class, which is an older vessel. Still checks out though, because that's what it looks like. So it's like a little Oliver Hazard Perry or a smaller Arleigh Burke. That's kind of the best way to describe it.
Yeah, kind of so. This one here is a little bit older looking, but it looks pretty good. Also off the Mississippi coast. That's interesting.
Let's see. Oh, this was during Hurricane Katrina.
Oh, I didn't know it showed up here during that.
Dang, man, that's kind of cool, actually. That's kind of neat. I wish I was old enough to know what was down there at that point, because we were like tiny kids at that point. But still, they also have a large amount of auxiliaries, including the Rotterdam and Johan de Witt class. I kind of find it funny that they named this class after a guy who had his liver eaten in public when he was executed by like a ravenous crowd. But that's the vessel. A little interesting. It's literally like an office block at sea. Like, this thing's chunky, but still pretty neat. They also have some landing craft as well. Not an incredibly large number of them. Also, you can see the Johan de Witt class in the background out there. You can actually see it because this is what the landing craft deploys from. But the Dutch Navy is just incredibly cool. I could go on and on and on about it. But the German Navy, which also had one of their minesweepers there, is also really cool as well. So let me see if I can get y'all the German Navy. Simply called the Deutsche Marine. They don't call it the Kriegsmarine anymore. But moving on from that and on down the list, man, look at that.
Man, they've got some nice stuff too. I like this. It's the Baden-Württemberg class frigate in Wilhelmshaven in April 2017.
Man, you know, when I gotta be honest with you, man, modern European naval vessels, whenever they show up, man, you just hear, gonna pimp my ride, gonna pimp, and then they say, get out of our waters, like, or something like that. It's like, so
well, see, they got the benefit of having less ships and less equipment, so they can kind of put more money, I guess, into less equipment and make it much nicer. But yeah, their stuff's like super nice, man. The design's always on point. They keep it nice and clean. Like, it's very prideful what they have.
I mean, it's just always so cool looking. You know, you got the Sachsen class, hopefully pronouncing that right. You also have the Brandenburg class frigates. I mean, all of them just look incredibly cool. I just think that the German and Dutch navies are really neat. Really big fans of them. The French Navy, let me go make an honorable mention of the French Navy, because I know that the Royal Navy always gets all of the gravy, but the other navies of Europe are also really impressive as well with the kind of equipment that they have. And the French Navy, oddly enough, also has a very in-depth history, much like the British Navy. But they also have a couple of submarines. The Triumphant class is what we would call that in English. They also have a couple of other classes of submarines that are also in service, smaller attack subs. They also have an aircraft carrier. The British have 2, the French have 1. And let's see here. I'm trying to see if I can find y'all their surface ships. Oh yeah, here we go. The Horizon class. Oh, just so
that one's kind of iffy. I'm not gonna lie. That one's a little strange looking.
What?
It looks like it was made with a computer generated model or something, like out of like Roblox.
Dude, I'm not gonna lie. Oh, it's good. They got the Aquitaine class, which is kind of like an LCS, kind of like filling the same role.
I like that one.
That one's clean. And they also have the Intervention class frigates.
Whoa, that's honestly a trippy looking one. Really, that between the paint color and the shapes, it's real like. It almost doesn't look real.
You know what it looks like, man? It almost looks like a early ironclad era vessel, nearly, with like a really interesting kind of a paint job.
Yeah, how did we go back with like ship design? We went from like these really complex like battleship designs and things like that. Then we went to like this design where it's like flat, like straight surfaces. It's kind of odd.
I'm not gonna lie, dude. I really like it. Like, I like the return to the classics, like with the vessel designs and the hull designs. They just look cool. Like, I just think they look amazingly cool. This thing almost looks fake, man. It looks like the light isn't even like interacting with the surfaces properly. But still, it's incredibly neat. They also have the Lafayette class, which is just very minimalist. I don't know if I like that one, honestly, because it's a little too minimalist. but an interesting design nevertheless. And they also have the Floreal class, which is a little bit of an older one, but still in service, but still very neat as well.
Okay. Everybody's saying that was a stealth vessel, the last one we just looked at?
Let's see, the defense and intervention frigates. Let me go put that in on Google.
Yeah, because everybody's saying it's stealth, but maybe that would explain why it's got these services like that on it. That would explain it, but I don't know if it's stealth or not.
Wait a minute. Yeah, here we go. We can actually get the article right here. Let's see. Is a program produced a new class of first-rank French frigates to complement the Aquitaine class. Let's see. Laid down. Let's see. Response to operate in a crisis zone. Let's see. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see. We want to know if it's stealth or not, and I'm not seeing if
I'm
it's
not
stealth.
seeing anything about it being stealth. I'm looking over there on the little side, like, summary. I'm not seeing anything on it.
That's a computer-generated model. That's not the real one. Where in the... Oh, there it is. Wait, that's another computer generation. Never mind. Sorry. Well, I'm guessing
What if they're
this
all
thing...
computer generated? What if they don't have a navy at all?
That's a good question.
I'm asking the real question. Look, there's a real one.
Well, yeah, there's actually a couple of them here. You can see one right in front of it being fitted out too. I don't think this thing is stealth. Let me go and put this in on the internet, because if anything, it's probably a low visibility hull, because not even the Zumwalt, with the amount of money that we put into it, was able to be stealth. So let's see here. I don't think this thing is stealth. I think it's just like a low visibility hull or something like that. Or maybe it's just an interesting hull design to try and deal with the inclement weather conditions. I'm not really sure. I don't think this thing is stealth, though, because I'm not really seeing a lot about everyone saying, look, it's a stealth ship. Because even, like, once again, let me show y'all this just to get this to all of y'all. The Zumwalt, this thing here, which had loads of money put into and was supposed to be the future of the Navy, was supposed to be low visibility or stealth, and it didn't really achieve that at all. It's not even low visibility. It's just it has a normal radar signature if you were to try and detect this thing with radar, so not stealth at all. But anyways, with that, we're going to be moving out of this naval rabbit hole. The pictures, though, we're just bussing, like, all the way. It's just an amazing-looking series of pictures here. And it's wonderful to know that the Dutch, German, and Norwegian naval and air forces were in the area today making sure to stop Russian sabotage actions. If anything, they were doing a great photo op. Also, one other thing that I want to throw in is that we have been able to see that the United States has continued to provide support, as another 747 did land in Rajau today with more U.S. military aid on board, showing that the United States is still actively supporting Ukraine as of right now, and the support didn't even see a skip or a stoppage for even a short while. It is continuing on. Once again, I gotta say this one, I gotta beat this over the head of everyone, because, like, I have to, because we've been saying this for a year, and there was a lot at stake if we were wrong, but we got this dead on the nail. Like, we were exactly dead on target with what we said nearly a year ago at this exact same time, about no matter who was going to be elected, nothing was going to change, and we were dead on the money. Nothing has changed at all.
The second prediction I had, though, was that there would be an ego war that eventually starts after something goes sideways. That prediction hasn't come true just yet, but there are rumblings of it, like we've heard today, of these sort of like ultimatums being given to Russia. That could spark the ego war between the United States and Russia because of the type leaders that are in charge. And if it starts like that, that could spiral out of control quick. And that was kind of my like semi-prediction about a couple of months ago, was that might happen. So it's still possible, but it's too early to tell.
Maybe so. Hopefully that wouldn't happen, but it's always out there. It could always happen, possibly, maybe, but hopefully not. But beyond that, though, I do want to say that today's news, I hope that all of y'all are seeing, has been wild. But I have to get y'all even bigger news that's come out of the Middle East today. Something that I think is great. Many of y'all will already know that Hamas and Hezbollah are designated as terrorist organizations, or I was about to say terrorist-affiliated organizations, and I had to stop myself because that was too long, and then I screwed up saying just terrorist organizations, but both of them have been listed as terrorist organizations by the United States for quite some time. However, one group that has never been on that list is the Yemeni Houthis. They have never been on that list. They have never been designated a terrorist organization by the United States of America. But today, we have great news, as the last Iranian proxy force in the entirety of the Middle East that was not directly stated as a terrorist organization and therefore would have hostile direct American actions conducted on them at any moment to drive them pretty much into obsolescence or extinction, has been declared today. The United States of America, through the office of the president, has declared that it is now the policy of the United States to cooperate with its regional partners to eliminate the Houthis' capabilities and operations, deprive them of resources, and thereby end their attacks, declaring them as a foreign terrorist organization. This is huge news, because this now means that the United States can direct whatever military efforts we would like to fight them, because they are now technically a terrorist force and not just some sort of a belligerent party inside of a domestic civil war inside of Yemen. So this now means that the United States can go out of its way to endlessly conduct hostile actions without really any justification needed. We can just bomb them into oblivion, help out the Yemeni government in re-securing the major population areas to the west, and hopefully see that the situation comes to an end once and for all. Things are looking up, and it's great to see. We've been watching this in progress for 3 years now. The last presidency worked a pretty decent measure towards getting us to this point. The current administration is carrying this on and getting it on to the finish line. A great thing to see overall, and once again, another success for the United States of America and the Republic. But before we move on from that and on into the little bits of news that we have inside of Afghanistan, which is just kind of a footnote, and then covering everything else that happened in Ukraine today and also in Russia because of the Ukrainian deep strikes, we do have a interesting little thing to talk about. Speaking of the Middle East, Iran is a little scared. It's not even like a joke. They are legitimately scared, and I think that we have it on our Twitter, Matthew. I didn't put it here on the map tonight, but the Iranian government is literally going, "We didn't do it. Don't do it." like they're literally
the October terror attack. They're saying that they didn't have a role in it at all. They're saying, "Oh, we didn't know that was going to happen. And if we would have known that, we would have put a stop to it." It's like, yeah, right. Come on.
Let me see here if we can find that, because it was gold. Gold, Jerry, gold! Let me see if I can see it. Oh, man. Where is it? Oh, I think it was... Hang on. Yeah. I know where it is. Hang on, we're just going to keep scrolling. Eventually, we'll make it to it. I'll know it when I see it. I'll know it when I see it. I got to keep believing that. I'll know it when I see it.
It should be like 10 down, like if you go to the profile.
Oh, dang, man. I went way below that. Like, I was like down 50 below that. So let's see here. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, no, that was the Taliban. Oh, here we go. All right, so let me... I want to show you all this, because this was stated by an Iranian representative at the World Economic Forum today, because this is now the story that Iran is going with.
We didn't know about October 7th. Actually, we were supposed to have a meeting with the Americans on JCPOA renewal on October 9th. Which was undermined and destroyed by this operation.
Oh, terrible.
Yeah, that's right. The whole time. It was just undermined by that little operation right there that they had no part in and knew nothing about, even though they fund the groups from the ground up. They didn't know anything about it. They were shocked. They wanted that JCPOA renewed. That's what they wanted.
They look, man, like they didn't sit there and fire hundreds of missiles at Israel because they killed the leader of the group that supposedly undermined all of their foreign policy, Nasrallah. It's not like they did that because they really were acting in support of Hezbollah and Hamas the entire time. It's not at all like they sat there and openly said that Israel is going to face their wrath if they crush Hamas and Hezbollah for about 1.5 years now. It's not like they did any of that, guys. Look, Iran is a bunch, like the Iranian government is full of good, well-hearted people. Whenever they chant death to America and death to Israel inside of the Iranian National Assembly, that's not because they want us all dead. No, they're saying that because they care for us. They really do. They're just kind of
tough love. That's all it is. It's tough love from Iran toward the West. That's all. Oh my God, man. Nobody's buying that bull crap right there. Like, it's amazing they're even saying that, because if you use rationale, you should know that the U.S. is not going to believe that crap, because the evidence is all over the place that Iran's been funding these proxy groups. So for them to be saying that, they are really getting cowardly. Like, they are scared shitless right now. They know it's coming. Like, they know what's coming next.
Oh man, justice is going to be sweet for this group, because it's really funny to see. They were willing to run their mouths when they had a decent idea that the United States was going to be reserved in the area. Now they're a little bit uncertain whether America is going to be reserved in the area or not. So now they're going to go, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was just the proxy groups we fund. It wasn't us. Like, it's like, that is you. It's like, those groups are Iran. It's like, all of them have direct support and connections to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is an actual part of the Iranian government. It's the armed wing of Iran's ruling political party. They only have one. And so they are directly connected to Iran in every way. Hamas is connected to Iran, Hezbollah is connected to Iran, and the Houthis are connected to Iran. So if they do something, Iran's done it. That's largely how the United States views it. That's how the world should view it, and that's how we're going to deal with it, most likely moving forward. And that's probably why the Iranians are now pissing their pants. I'm sending this guy out to Davos, to the World Economic Forum, to go, it wasn't me! It wasn't me! It's like, we do not care. It's like, it was y'all, and there's no getting around that at this point. The consequences will flow, most likely. And even if the United States does not get involved, Israel is probably going to have a blank check to do whatever they want. So we'll probably see that the Iranians get a pretty decent thrashing, whether the United States is doing it directly or not. Whether Israel is doing it, or we are doing it, or both of us are doing it, the Iranians are going to be in for a probably a tough year this year. It's going to be a bad year to be in Iran. Like, that's probably going to be the for sureness of that. But still, it is them. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And it does seem as though a lot of people are kind of on the same page as we are, because Iran is trying to backtrack their role in supporting the proxy forces, or in better words, terrorists. And a lot of people are wondering what's going on. And everyone's saying they're scared. So Matthew, what is everyone saying about that? And what are you thinking about it as well?
So virtually everybody on the channel, about 87% said Iran knows the U.S. will strike, and they are very, very scared. 1% said Iran didn't have a role in it. Honestly, that might be bots. But 6% also said they are negotiating with the USA. And they are not negotiating. They are basically crying out for help at this point because they realize they've stepped in it, and now someone might be coming after them for all the evil deeds they've done toward Israel and the West in the Middle East. And the time is coming around very shortly. They're going to have to pay a price for it. And the U.S. is going to exact that on them probably in the next coming months. Because it sounds like there are rumblings in the background that the U.S. themselves might end up striking Iran and taking out their nuclear sites along with Israel. So that would be a big, big move. And the Iranians are worried that Tehran might get struck too, apparently. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it does appear that the Iranians are considerably scared at this moment of what might be happening in the future, because once again, I have to remind everyone, we're not trying to make it sound like things are changing. Things really aren't changing. Well, things are changing a little bit, but the general premise is the same. The United States, under the prior presidency, was unfriendly towards Iran. The current presidency appears, at least according to what they were already saying before they took office, that they're going to be hostile towards Iran, openly hostile to the point of aggressive action, which means bombing them. So from what I can generally understand, they're now scared because the U.S. isn't going to be sitting there and kind of allowing Israel to strike back by saying, hey, look, we don't want this thing to turn into a big deal. Now it looks like the United States might say, look, we don't like him as well. Let's just bomb him. And so now they're getting incredibly scared that that might be the reality. And that sounds very simple. Usually things are a lot more difficult in analysis, but that's largely exactly how it's going to go. The United States is going to say, look, we both have generally a policy of Iranian containment, and not only that, they're producing nuclear weapons, let's just bomb them. And we might bomb them in conjunction with the Israelis, or the Israelis might be given a green light to bomb whatever they want, or the United States might go in with them and bomb anything that we want along with the Israelis. Either way, I think the Iranians are getting the idea that bombings are coming around, and they're getting incredibly scared of that reality, and they're trying to see if they can maybe chicken out at the last minute so that way the U.S. won't bomb them, and hopefully they'll be able to buy themselves enough time to create a nuclear weapon. I have a feeling that that's
also, isn't it funny, by the way, that the proxy forces just happened to sort of like start giving in to negotiations, like with the hostages, around the same time that Iran decided to start getting really cowardly and scared out of the blue. It seems almost like Iran told them to chill out so that way they can try to get some mercy on themselves.
Yeah, you know what they were doing, man. They were saying they're talking to all of the leaders of Hezbollah, which oddly enough are in Qatar, and they were probably telling them, look, things are about to get really bad. Like, the current U.S. administration is almost on the verge of bombing us. The next one is going to bomb us. We need to back off and see if we can stop them from doing that, because we're working on a nuclear weapon. And if y'all continue to push this thing forward, the incoming administration is not going to have the reservations the last one did, which was already wanting to bomb us. So let's just hold it off, and let's just try and wait this thing out. And then the Hezbollah and Hamas leaders were like, okay, we will try. And so they tried to do the little half-hearted hostage exchange, which was honestly lopsided, and that wasn't even really fair, but they still tried to do it. And of course, I'm saying that was really unfair towards the Israeli-American side. But they still tried to do it, really didn't do it too well, and that's probably going to seal Iran's fate. to be entirely honest. Moving on is the future. Also, there's been some discussions that the United States may allow Israel to remain in Lebanon for an additional 60 days after the ceasefire came into effect, and they were supposed to withdraw. So it looks like there may also be an extension to Israel being in Lebanon and being in control of once Hezbollah lands within southern Lebanon. So very interesting to see with that. But beyond that, I think the Iranians are 100% entirely scared. Before we move on, though, into the frontline news inside of Ukraine and also the deep strike information in Russia, I do want to make sure that we address a couple of questions from the chat, because the chat has been going wild tonight. Let me actually see how many chats have come in so far. Oh my lord, it's been well over 100 pretty much every minute on the stream. So I
believe it. I tell you what, those bots have been flooding in here tonight as well. It's just been flowing rapidly tonight. It's been a lot of bot bashing going on, so it's been wild in the chat.
Man, I'm telling you, I can only assume. I've been busy covering the news. I haven't looked at it much. But what kind of questions do we have from the chat, Matthew? Speaking of which.
All right, so let's jump into our first super chat of the night, and this one is going to go to James Hughes. And thank you very much, James, for the very generous $50 donation. Very massive support, and we appreciate that. He said, "Why are the Russians so stupid?" I like that, James. He said, "They still fight like World War II and still don't know this war was a complete waste of time and money, and most of all, the tragic loss of life."
I gotta thank you so much for the massive support, James Hughes, and that is a question as old as time. Actually, no one really knows why Russia does what Russia does. It doesn't really make much sense unless if you're Russian. But the reason why they seem to be stupid is because there is a large amount of corruption that is rife within the Russian Federation, and a lot of people always hear, because of the political lens that's kind of brought forward in America, oh, the American government and the American nation is rife with corruption. It's nowhere close to the kind of corruption that Russia has. And of course, I would be amiss to not say that there isn't corruption in the U.S. government. Some of it's very clear, like insider trading, which practically most everyone on all sides in Congress gets a little piece of the pie on. That is, an open bit of corruption that anyone can see. But corruption, to the extent that it exists in Russia, it doesn't even get close to existing in here. And some people are like, oh yeah, it does. No, it does not, because the kind of corruption that exists in Russia, if you get pulled over by a cop, slip him 100, and you're scot-free. That corruption does not exist inside the United States because of the whole body cam deal. Maybe back in the day it did. Nowadays, sure as hell won't, because that was ever caught on the body camera and someone requested a Freedom of Information Act to get it. That cop's losing their job. They don't want to lose their job, so they're going to sit there and arrest you for bribery. Or, better yet, if you go to the DMV to get a new driver's license, or if you go to the county courthouse to get a new license plate, well, you're sure as hell not going to be able to slide them an extra, $150 to have that expedited, quote unquote, and delivered to your home. That is not happening. In Russia, that easily would happen. That's the kind of corruption that exists in Russia. Throughout the entire system, the thing is corrupt to its core. There is no part where there really is a lack of corruption. Even on the lowest levels of the government, the entire thing is crooked to the core. And for this reason, the Russian military is also crooked to its core as well. And of course, some people are going to say, well, what about the United States research and development stuff where, like you buy a $20,000 wrench? Nah, yeah, that's, of course, that's fairly corrupt, probably. I'm sure that's being, that's probably a little too expensive for a wrench. I don't buy wrenches a lot, and if it's a Snap-on, then that's probably a fair price. But beyond that, I would have to say that the Russians they're probably using outdated tactics because everyone's so corrupt in the Russian military, they're just there to rake in the dough. I mean, they don't use their positions like they do in the U.S. military, where someone would actually be trying to develop new doctrines and tactics and strategy to try and figure out how to defeat our enemies around the world and deal with different kinds of situations. Russian officers are just there to try and use the position to rake in a little bit more dough. And the military side of things, fighting a war and all that, that's for someone else. Those schmucks can figure that out. I'm just here to collect the money. That's what a Russian officer's thinking. And so, for the by and large, most of the military is not evolving and it isn't really adapting to anything or the changing world around them. It's just sitting there, stagnant, because there's no reason to develop for the Russian mindset or the Russian officer. So, for this reason, when the Russians go into a war, their tactics are dated. Their tactics are just just like they're behind the times. Like they are fighting a war that would be seen in the 70s and the early 80s. This is a war of the modern age. Like this is the kind of war that would have been fought hell, before the Gulf War in 1991, and we're now in 2024 and 2025, and they're still fighting a war that would have been fought back in the 80s over the fields of Eastern Europe. And it's just not that kind of a thing anymore, yet they still will not evolve out of that. And also another thing is that even if they wanted to, they don't have the money to do it. The Soviet Union actually allowed them to, at least on a sense, keep up with the West a little bit. They were always about 5 to 10 years behind, but that's a lot better than being 20 and 30 years behind like they are right now. But beyond that, that all came apart really when when the Soviet Union collapsed. The Soviet Union had a whole bunch of different republics, Ukraine actually being one of them, and each one of them largely specialized in one thing. Ukraine was largely the technological side of the Soviet Union. The Russian Federation in the modern day was really the oil producer of the Soviet Union along with Kazakhstan. All of the Stan series countries, oddly enough, created agricultural products, and Ukraine and Russia also did as well. And then some of the other countries like the Baltic states and Belarus also did kind of their own things. I forgot specifically what they were. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, all of these different specialized sectors weren't really able to lean on each other, or all of the specialized republics, if you want to call them that. And so the modern-day Russian Federation doesn't have the robust and diversified economic structure that the Soviet Union had to truly be able to largely be economically viable as a country in the modern day. Their only industry is the oil industry. It's the monolith. If it fails, the entire Russian economy fails, and it really doesn't make a lot of money either because it's a raw material. It's not something that's refined like a computer component that really does fetch a high price out there. Oil is pretty easy to get these days. You just drill, set up a well, oil flows. It's very easy. So it doesn't really make a lot of money, kind of like coal or any other kind of a natural gas or a natural resource or a fossil fuel. And so the Russians don't have a lot of money or really a diversified economy to work with to research and develop new tech and equipment to actually modernize their military on the technological level either. So for those reasons, that's why the Russians always look so stupid and antiquated. It's really because of the high amounts of corruption and the little amount of money that they have. It combines to make a lethal toxic poison for the Russian military and what it looks like in war. But I hope that does address that incredibly well, James Hughes, and thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to answer really good questions like that and also get another jab in at the Russians, which is a pretty Western and American thing to do. So with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here goes to none other than Glock, who's there, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Mr. Glock, for that $50 support and helping to keep us running once again. And they said, have you heard the song B.O.M.B. Iran from 1980?
I have not actually, Glock Who's There. I have not heard that song. I have heard of this thing that happened kind of around the time called Operation Praying Mantis, where we bombed the Iranian Navy, but I haven't heard of that song. But I still thank you so much for the big support, the massive support, and helping this channel to keep on rolling. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And also before we move on, Matthew, it just hit me. But I was sitting here, man, and I was getting a laugh out of this. What in the world is Lex Fridman thinking right now?
I don't even have a clue, man. I heard that, I believe what I heard is he got the Putin interview and he's going to be actually going to do that at some point. So I'll be curious to see how that turns out. But I'll withhold any comments until I hear it.
Oh, man. Well, already hearing his video that he made, the address to the people who had concerns about his take, like, I'm assuming that interview is not going to be going too well. But I'm getting a laugh out of that man at this point because he was sitting there going, no. Y'all don't understand. Putin really wants peace. He's about to see that he doesn't. Like, it's like he's about to see that he doesn't here in a minute.
Why he doesn't want peace at all? Why would he want peace? That way he can go right back to his country, withdraw his troops, and then go right back to economic devastation. It's like, why? Why would he do that? He would have no incentive to do that.
Dude, what is Tucker Carlson thinking? Like, what are any of those people thinking, man? Like, the people who are like, oh, they want to end the war. They're people who love peace and their groceries are cheap. It's like, what are they going to say now? I mean, like, it's like we're about to ramp things up. It's like, I don't know what the hell they're even thinking, because this is certainly...
How come Tucker never issued a retraction for the grocery prices? Because now it's not affordable there anymore. It really never was, because if you factor in the Russian income per average person, they don't make enough hardly to buy anything. So it's like, the groceries aren't cheap. Maybe to an American with USD, maybe it's cheap, but not to the Russians.
Man, I'm telling you, man, I can't wait to see what the reactions to this are. I don't know what the reactions will be because once again, want to remind everyone, we knew this was coming. Like we've been saying this for a year on the channel. This was coming down the pipe. It was a natural evolution of things, really of foreign policy and national prerogatives. But I think these people are probably getting blindsided by the ultimatum that was delivered today, and so now they're like, oh, what the, like I'm sure they're going to be shocked and they don't even know what the hell to make of it. So I'm going to be interested in what's going to be happening here. So I'm going to be interested. I'm going to be wildly interested to see what their takes are. I'm going to be getting a good laugh out of it. But anyways, with that, we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're moving on into the rest of the news for the night.
All right, and this one is going to go to Purple Gerbil, who puts in a $40 donation, and thank you very much, Purple Gerbil, for that $40 support and helping to keep us running yet again. Of course, just like Glock, Purple Gerbil is a longtime channel legend, also just like James Hughes. So big shout out to Purple Gerbil. And they said, please take a live chat in LSA forever, and thank you, Enforcers, for your perspectives.
And thank you so much for the massive support, Purple Gerbil, and supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, because folks like you have made this thing possible and helped us to keep it running. And it's crazy to think y'all have helped this channel to keep on running, which crazily enough was able to say something that no one else said on the internet. People blasted us for it. Like, we actually got some shade from some people at different times because we were saying what seemed to be the most sensible and the most logical, and others were largely being fueled by emotion alone and not a pragmatic approach. And I gotta say, I gotta thank folks like you, Purple Gerbil, for always being with this channel, always having faith in the channel, and always supporting it and helping it to keep on running, because you allow our special kind of a voice that we have to be on air day in and day out, and to say the things that we always say, which sometimes are wrong, but in instances like these, it's a pretty sweet moment to be right, because I think we were the only people who were right on the internet, because a whole group was saying, we're going to conduct appeasement and end the war, and that's right, and then others were saying, oh no, the war is going to end, and we're all going to be screwed, and we're all going to die, and all of them were wrong, and I think we were the only people who were right, so we were dead on the money, and I'm happy to be here for that, and I got to thank you, Purple Gerbil, for being a part of that, and helping us to keep this channel running, and to continue to put out the news in a non-political way, in a factual way, that literally no one else can get down at this point, and so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well, and also, Matthew, let's get that live chat in honor of Purple Gerbil.
All right, so the live chat question is going to go to, let's see here. So I'm looking for it. See one that's sort of closer to the topic we're discussing. So let's see here. This one goes to Togrul, who says, my question is, how would Sweden, as part of NATO, will do what for NATO?
It's just another member of the alliance. It's not really like any of them bring anything to the table, to be entirely honest, rather than just being a member. So basically what it is, are you scared of Russia? If the answer is yes, join us. They won't attack you because we're stronger together than apart. That's the whole premise of NATO. So they don't bring anything special to the table. It's not like they bring in a UFO or anything like that. They're just Sweden. They have their military, they have their country, and that's it, really, like everyone else. So that's kind of the deal. So with that, I hope that does answer that live chat the best I can, at least the simplest way I can. I hope it was a simple answer. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the remainder of the news that we have tonight. And also, I saw someone say that now Tucker Carlson's going to have to change his mind about the orcs. I'm going to tell you this. It's going to, one of two things is going to happen. I'm not sure about how this will work because it's going to be different for each person. Either they're going to turn against the president and say that he's a warmonger and betrayed him, or they're going to completely turn their song around to where they also don't like the Russians and they want to watch the Russians get defeated by the Western world combined. It's going to be one or the other. I don't know which one they'll do. It really depends on what they weigh out, because once again, these people aren't really saying what they think. I actually think Lex Fridman is saying what he thinks. But with Tucker Carlson, he's not saying what he thinks. He's saying what he thinks his audience wants to hear. So he's going to have to weigh out, what does his audience really want to hear? Do they want to end up to start hating the president and saying that he lied to them and betrayed them? Or is he going to say that his audience actually is just going to follow whatever the president says, and, now they're going to want to blow up the Russians or something like that? That's going to be what he has to weigh out. And then we're going to see what his response to that will be. And I'm going to be very interested, because it's going to be one of those two. There's no third one that could be out there at this point. But anyways, moving on from that and on into the rest of the big news tonight, we were able to see within Kazan, and Kazan is an interesting place. The oblast that it's in is called Tatarstan, like tartar sauce. And I gotta tell you, man, the Ukrainians be lathering it on, because up in the area of northeastern Kazan, in this area is the Tupolev Manufacturing Hall and Aircraft Manufacturing Facility. It takes up this entire area of the city right here, and most importantly, it produces Tu-22 M3 backfires and Tu-160 blackjacks for the Russian Air Force, which are both the strategic bombers that Russia uses to be able to bomb Ukraine. Also, one interesting thing of note, an important thing of note, is that this is the only fueling facility on the entire airbase, which allows for them to fuel up the aircraft that they had produced or refurbished and then fly them back to the Russian air wings that had sent them here or had ordered these aircraft. That fuel facility got hit and was blown to pieces. There it is. There's the fire.
Oh, oh no. They won't be flying out any brand new deliveries this time.
And there's the little fuel silos right there, once again, to make sure that it's properly geolocated. So it looks like that thing do be cooking, and things are going quite warm and toastily in Kazan for the Russians. Moving on from that, we also were able to see the North Koreans were sending in more SPGs. We already covered that earlier, so now it's time for us to get into the juice. In Kursk, we were able to see that a panzer was trying to shoot down a drone. That post was sadly removed. But within the Kursk area, we were able to see them taking down some drones in the 117th Heavily Mechanized Brigade, or Heavy Mechanized Brigade is a technical term. I got thrown off because of this clap. I got thrown off from that. But anyways, here's the clip of them taking out this Russian kamikaze drone.
A Russian kamikaze drone?
Man, it's that kamikaze.
Look at it go. It's going pretty fast, too. It looks like this drone's having a hard time catching up with it.
Man, that drone up there, man, it's starting to run out of air, man. It's going, it's like, I gotta get away from this thing. And the Ukrainian drone, it just can't outrun it. Here is why Ukraine's anti-drone efforts are the best in the world. And there was the answer.
Yes.
It's absolutely great to see. But moving on from the Kursk Oblast and on into the area of Kyiv, we were also able to hear what Zelensky had to say today about the U.S. threat that was given to the Russians. He said, first and foremost, that Russia must return back to its 2022 borders to start on a fair negotiating dialogue. So the direct quote was, Russia must at least return to the 2022 borders. This would be a fair opportunity to start a dialogue. So, let me...
Oh, I love it. I honestly love that about Zelensky. That is one thing that really does stand out about him. He has stuck to that, like, pretty much the entire time, and he hasn't backed off of it one bit. And I guess he'll stick to it long enough that the incoming admin, or actually the new admin here in the U.S., will just start going with it, I guess, because it sounds like they're kind of running with it.
So to show y'all what the Russians have to give up, everything that's behind the black line here in Crimea and also over here in the Donbass is what the Russians would have to fall back to for negotiations to begin, according to the Ukrainians. So they'd have to give up most of everything that they have at this point to start negotiations. So I don't think the Russians will do that. I think that's a no. And I also think for that reason, the war will most likely go on. But also another thing that I want to remind everyone, someone said, that ain't happening, is that Zelensky is talking to the President of the United States and has been for a while, along with the prior president. And most likely, Zelensky said, Mr. President, I would like to have them fall back to their 2022 pre-invasion borders to begin the negotiation. And the president said, that's a great one. Go ahead and say it. And so he said it, and that's why that was the statement made today. Because the Ukrainians are most likely not making statements out of conjunction with the United States and asking for things that the United States wouldn't be okay with, considering that we are their major arms supplier and economic supporter at this point. They largely have to run everything through us and check it on the major strategic level to see if we're both on the same footing. So that's most likely exactly what's going to be happening. But moving on from that and on into our next little bit of news in Kyiv from Zelensky today, we also were able to hear that Zelensky wants U.S. peacekeeping troops in Ukraine post-war, saying that that's really the only way to have an effective peacekeeping force inside of the country. So it appears that Zelensky is pushing for U.S. peacekeeping troops to be in the country post-war. Moving on from that...
So also, real quick, Enforcer, before we move too far away from this, I forgot, we were actually sent a map of the 2022 pre-invasion borders here. I've sent it to your Discord if you want to show it to the audience. And just to give credit where credit is due, it was sent in by Miss Disa, who found it. So if you want to show that, we can actually take a look.
This is actually post-war, post-invasion. That's what they were controlling several days in.
Are you sure about that? It says February 28, 2022.
The war started on the 23rd, so this is like 5 days in.
Oh, well, maybe it's a little bit too late then. But good try, Miss Disa.
But it does show, like, kind of like in the dashed areas, Crimea and the DPR and the LPR, which we have in black here on the map. So anything within the black fields down here in Crimea or over here is what the Russians controlled before the invasion in 2022. This map is showing what they controlled about a week in. Which already was a significant area. But nevertheless, that's not what the Ukrainians would want them to fall back to. They wouldn't really be falling back. They'd kind of just be exchanging the percentage they have now for a percentage just presented in a different way in different areas. But moving on from that and into our next bit of news in the location unknowns, we were able to see some Ukrainian Mi-24s in flight. I don't know why I called them Russian in the caption, but here they are. Man, look at him roaring across the fields. Look at
that. It's a hind, also known as a savage. Oh, they're coming right for this guy.
Man,
look at that.
dang.
They're about to chop him down.
Man, that's why they call him a Ukrainian chopper. Like, it's like...
Man, chopping them down day by day.
Americans might have Harleys, but Ukrainians have the best choppers in the world. And then they show like an Mi-24. But anyways, moving on from that and into our next clip, we were also able to see a Russian quad was destroyed, and this Russian was very sad about it. He had just gotten done repairing it, he said in the video, and then it got blown up.
Вот он, квадроцикл, наш любимый. Только починили сегодня, сука.
Бочку перевернул, нормально.
Oh, the pig, as Stephen Gerrard said. But moving on from that and into the Russian casualty report, we also were able to see the losses, and holy moly.
We got one Bobcat today. I'd love to see it. 3,711 Bobcats in total. That's a nice round figure. Not exactly round, actually, but it's a little bit of an odd figure, but it's a good one. But Enforcer, tell us more.
And like the Russians got disrespected by the United States today, by the British, by the NATO task force, Baltic Sentry in the Baltic, they also got disrespected by the Ukrainians today because the Ukrainians put out a whopper of a casualty report. This thing was actually impressive. 1,950 personnel is the 6th highest loss of the entire war, tied with November 12th of last year, according to Ms. Disa, the keeper of the records, along with 60 artillery pieces being tied with 4 others as the 14th highest daily loss of the war. 141 drones is the 4th highest loss of the war. The 1st through 5th all were in January of this year, and 155 vehicles is the 6th highest loss of the war as well. So the losses were insane today, and let's break them down. 1,950 Russian and North Korean soldiers wounded and killed is a pretty impressive number, along with 8 armored personnel carriers, 155 supply trucks, 11 tanks are getting carried away there, 60 artillery pieces, 141 drones, and 1 Bobcat skid steer, all destroyed in one day. It's a wonderful thing to see, and we love to see that the Russian Federation is just continuing to take losses. Let's move on down the line, shall we, and see where they were taking them. Because we were able to see that a Russian T-80 was hit around the area of Vovchansk and blown up. We can see the T-80 right there.
Oh, Bliat. Look at him moving along, creeping along like the Russian roaches, Bliat.
Man, did someone say roaches? But they're about to get treated like the roaches. And
dear.
Bang! Oh, dang!
Oh,
my
what the hell
goodness.
was that, man? It just fired some junk.
It sent off a smoke grenade. Like, it blew up a smoke grenade on the side of the turret. That was actually pretty rare. But very nice to see.
Slower.
I guess you could say the Russians gave him a little smoke show. But anyways, moving on from that and on down into the area of the Northern Arcade front, we were also able to see the Russians getting hit by the 42nd Mechanized Brigade down here.
Man, we're looking at it in 260p, but damn, look at that.
Oh, man, and look at that. They got him. They got him, man. Well, you see them hitting him again. Holy moly. And then there goes another drone right back into the engine bay. There's so many drones hitting the back of this tank. I guess you could say that they're blowing the back out. But they were really doing a great job. Whoa, Sonny. Whoa. But they're doing a great job.
Jack. Whoa. Listen, calm down.
Hey, why?
Listen, you think that we didn't want to blow the tanks back out? I mean, what are you kidding?
Like, it's just like...
Do you really think I wasn't in the hills with Xi Jinping? Do you really think I wasn't?
What were you doing in the hills with Xi Jinping? I don't know. Like, I don't even know. But anyways, moving on from that and on down towards the Kremenna area, we were able to see the 63rd Mechanized Battalion, actually the 63rd Mechanized Brigade, taking out some Russians. They used a drone-mounted loudspeaker to order the Russians to a safe surrender point. So we can see the drone coming on in, loudspeaker installed. and about to start playing that Cardi B music over this guy. That'll really make him surrender. And they said, give up, you will live. Drop the weapon, follow the drone. We will give you the last chance. If you don't give up, we will kill you. This was apparently a very enthusiastic message. And so he dropped the bomblet so that way the Russian would not be afraid that he got bombleted at some point. We now see the Russian with his hands up in the air like he just don't care, following the drone. When you see that he covered his face with some sort of a derp. A little interesting choice there, but nevertheless a good one.
Dude's walking like he's got issues.
The dude's walking like he might have some spare change in his pants.
Rubles.
Actually, we called it shit. it's just like
Yeah. Oh dear, he's had a little accident before the drone almost got him. Oh dear.
Now we can see them processing them.
He said, "Do you have a spare wipe, sir? A dude wipe?" Oh, look at this. He's what a face on him.
And apparently he's singing. Let's see if we can hear it. One second, let me unmute it. Sadly, I won't be able to play much of that. Also, I don't think his singing skills are that great. Maybe that's why he's on the front. But anyways, moving on from that and out of that clip, we were also able to see in the same area that the 63rd was also, well, actually, that's a duplicate, so we're going to be getting rid of that. I just saw the derp face. I was like, that's a duplicate. But moving on from that and down towards Bakhmut, we were able to see a BMD-3 getting hit by a Ukrainian drone in this area. We can also see an elephant wearing nods. Here's why Ukrainian elephants can see the best in the world. Here it comes. Ah, the French drones. They've always been known for their excellence.
Would you like some Parmesan, good sir? Oh dear.
And that's
oh,
why,
the French.
And that's why you have to get your drones from none other than Parmesan.
Oh dear.
We can see them getting that thing ready to go. Oh, here it comes. Holy moly, and the static hit, but the non-elephant showed up to round us out. Holy moly, the elephants of war. I guess you could say that they're gonna unleash the dogs of war because the Ukrainians got that dog in them. But moving on from that and down towards the Pokrovsk area, we were able to see the Shadow Wizard Money Gang dropping some bomblets on the Russians. And also playing guitar. Chill guitar. But there it comes.
Oh dear, we can't play that here on the stream. We'll get a copyright complaint. We can't have it.
Yes, so this is the Russian thing. I had to make sure I didn't get this confused with the clip further south. Oh, and they got it. Oh, right on the engine bay.
He's still going. Oh dear. Oh, he stopped. Oh, they're evacuating. Look at that, taking off to the hills.
That tank was carrying way more people than can fit inside of it. I don't know where those came from. I guess they were hiding behind the turret. Like, I don't know. But dang, dude, they treated that thing like an APC.
That is crazy, too.
Oh, dude, oh my goodness, the ammo's about to detonate. I like how all of that was in Ukrainian except for Shadow. It was like this, Rosnavoy, FPV, Prudostili, Shadow. it's like just in like English, no Ukrainian accent or nothing. But we can see the drone coming in.
Kind of like when Zelensky talks, he'll say something in Ukrainian, you'll be like, Ukrainian, green from Ukraine.
No, man, it's like this. It's short name. It's the Ukrainian hamburger. You know, something like that. It's like,
man, he hits the occasional English subtitle. Look at this. It's just a charbroiled mess.
Man, charbroiled to perfection. Like Burger King. But moving on from that and down towards Kurakove, I mispronounced that, Kurakove, we got to see the Russians getting blasted down here. And interestingly enough, I do have to point this out, by a Leopard 1 of all things. We've never seen a Leopard 1 get this close to infantry and start blasting them, but that's a Leopard 1. That's a Leopard 1 from Germany right there. And the Russians are about to find out what that thing can still do. Dang! Blowing out the walls.
Yeah.
The Ukrainian tank commander said, container. And then the gunner said, container? I hardly know her. and then slapped his knee.
Also, by the way, I just saw Activista say in the live chat, "Oh my God, you have to pull up Paul Masson. We will sell no wine before the time with Orson Welles." That's hilarious. Oh my goodness, the enforcer's been obsessing over that for like the past 3 or 4 days. He's been showing it all the time.
Oh,
Activista.
man.
Like you'll probably see it again too tonight.
Ah, the French champagne. It has always been known for its excellence. And that is why you must pick Paul Masson.
But anyways, moving on from that and on into the next clip further down the line. Within the Southern Front in Zaporizhia, we were able to see a couple of bukes rebuked. There they are, both of them in the same field, largely.
Here you come,
Easily.
John.
Oh, and they pranked them. There went the first one, getting clustered. And it looks like that buke is out for the count. That buke's gonna puke. We can also see a tank right there, maybe a secondary target. We can see here the Russians can.
Here.
Huh?
Looks like a bit of a meeting of the minds here with the Russians.
Man, a meeting of the Russian minds must be. Are we to not be or not be? That is not the question. Like, or something like that. It's not even like deep or anything.
The Russians have no ability to enter into a contract because they don't have the ability to, of course, have a meeting of the minds here.
Oh, hitting them with that legalese. Like, holy
the
moly.
legalese.
Oh, that scares me. Oh, legalese, get away! Like and someone said, "What happens when the war ends? You're going back to legal studies?" Hell no. Like, the war ends. No. I'm not going back to that. I do anything but that.
I'll do anything but go back. You make it sound like prison.
Oh man, honestly, man, it was honestly, respectfully, it kind of was. Moving on from that though, and on up into Kyiv, it is now time for us to get to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, as we now hear a low-flying helicopter outside for no apparent
you hear
reason.
that too?
Yes, I do.
I think it's been circling around 3 times tonight. I guess they're looking for me.
Man, they must be looking for us all. But a group that looks for people better than anyone else, Matthew.
Who?
Oh, the French.
Oh, my son, he likes his cheap wine. Oh.
We will sell no cheap $1 wine before it's time. But moving on from that, it is time for the speech, and it is a long speech, a long-lasting speech. So we will actually have time to get a snack and also maybe a drink and pee. But with that, here, without further ado, the speech. Speech!
Доброго ранку, Україна, українці, наша держава міцна, незалежна, або єдина і соборна. Ми пам'ятаємо це завжди, особливо в цей день, 22 січня, День Соборності України. Я записую це звернення на Софійській площі, історичне місце, місце сили, місце мудрості, яку дають нам події, що стались тут понад 100 років тому. І подальші епізоди нашої історії, які доводять, коли ми боремось, то неодмінно ми здобуваємо своє, але коли ми сваримось, тоді своє втрачаємо. І саме тут, на цій площі, був проголошений акт злуки, право та лівобережна Україна об'єднались в єдину державу. Але амбіції, розбрат, вороги, які ними скористались, вороги, як, до речі, ззовні, так і всередині, не дали самостійній Україні існувати довго, на жаль. Державність нашу було втрачено, тобто втрачена власну свободу на довгі роки, на десятиліття, і це кілька поколінь, які жили під чужими прапорами, традиціями, яким наказували, як жити, як говорити, як думати, кого любити, кого ненавидіти. Ось що таке не своя державність, що таке втрата незалежності. І кожного року у цей день ми завжди згадували ці уроки соборності. Ми робили живі ланцюги, ми казали, як важливо берегти єдність, бути пліч-опліч. Але прийшов день, нам випало це довести. І 24 лютого, день, який став вирішальним моментом, таким викликом став, таким іспитом на єдність, на зрілість, на віру в Україну. І ми об'єднались. Українці всі об'єднались не декларативно, не на папері, не за якоюсь там командою, а за покликом всередині. Мільйони з нас разом змогли вистояти, зберегти Україну разом, дали відсіч окупанту, стримали цю велику навалу разом. У цьому слові «разом» прихована сила українців. Це про нас, про те, на що здатні ми, коли ми обираємо не якісь там власні амбіції, а обираємо Україну, обираємо її інтереси, коли обираємо не срач, а меч, боронити своє, боронити своїх, боронити усіма силами. Ми пам'ятаємо ці моменти. Не вистачало зброї на всіх добровольців, але точно вистачало хоробрості, небайдужості, віри в себе, віри в Україну. Вистачило сили усіх нас, всіх тих, хто доводить, рідна земля не закінчується межею власного подвір'я. Ось це і є соборність, ось це та єдність, яка необхідна, аби вибороти своє право жити в мирі. Це земля кожного українця, це наша столиця і ця площа, вона наша, кожного українця, кожної українки, наша Софія. Ось вона стоїть понад 1000 років і буде стояти стільки ж, я впевнений. Я вірю, що на цю площу будуть приходити діти наші, онуки, покоління і в День Соборності, в усі інші свята під синьо-жовтим прапором у нашій державі. І ми зробимо все, щоб так було, щоб було не соромно перед ними, аби вони знали, що ми не повторили помилок минулого. І Україна є, Україна єдина, мирна, соборна. Я хочу сьогодні привітати всіх з цим днем, з Днем Соборності України. Бажаю бути міцними, вірити в себе, вірити в Україну, точно знати. Українська єдність – це не тільки про 2 береги Дніпра, це про весь наш світ. Це сьогодні є Україна, де б ми не були. Всі ми, хто народився у різних містах, містечках, в селах, всі наші воїни, наші дітки, медики, волонтери, вчителі, енергетики, всі, хто сьогодні, де б він не був, скаже: я українець, я українка. Я хочу привітати вас з Днем Соборності, шановні, дорогі українці. Слава Україні!
Я військовослужбовець з міста Суми. Суми – це Україна.
Я українець з Горлівки, Донецької області. Донеччина – це Україна.
Я українка з Миколаєва. Миколаївщина – це Україна.
Я українець з Харкова. Харківщина – це Україна.
Я із міста Харків. Харків – це Україна.
Харківщина – це Україна.
Я військовослужбовиця з міста Лозова. Лозова – це Україна.
Я українець з Запоріжжя. Запорізька область – це Україна.
Енергодар – це Україна.
Я українка з міста Малина, Житомирської області. Житомирщина – це Україна.
Я військовий з міста Слов'янськ. Слов'янськ – це Україна.
Я громадянин України із Криму. І Крим – це Україна.
Я українка з Криму. Крим – це Україна.
Жовті води – це Україна.
Я українець із села Великосілки Львівської області.
Львівщина – це Україна.
Я українець з міста Одеси.
Одещина – це Україна.
Я військовослужбовець з міста Чернігів. Чернігів – це Україна.
Я українець з Києва.
Київ – це Україна.
Місто Герой Макарів – це Україна.
Я українець з Тернопілля. А Тернопільська область – це Україна.
Я військовослужбовець з міста Дружківки. Дружківка – це Україна.
Я з Вінницької області. Вінниччина – це Україна.
Я українець з Кропивницького. Кіровоградщина – це Україна.
Я українець із Закарпаття. Закарпаття – це Україна.
Я українець з міста Дніпра.
Дніпропетровщина – це Україна.
Дніпро – це Україна.
Я українець з Кривого Рогу. Кривий – це Україна.
Слава Україні!
Wait, dang, he's just out there like that?
I thought he was turning around to show a security team for a second, but there's nobody.
Dude, he's just out there in the middle of the town. Like, hang on, we got his...
Всіх вітаю.
And Hiram Slava, but honestly...
Slava.
I was kind of blown away by that, dude. When you turned that around, I thought he was going to have like a security team out there being like, Hiroim Slav, and then it was just like, just no one. It was like, what? I was like, he's just, that's crazy, honestly.
He's good in the streets of Kryvyi Rih, man. He's got that street cred.
Man, I think he was in Kyiv making that video, but still, wherever he was.
Kryvyi Rih. He said he was from Kryvyi Rih.
He was from Kryvyi Rih. That doesn't mean he's in Kryvyi Rih.
Hell, I thought he turned around and like pointed the camera at the people of Kryvyi Rih. I thought that's what he was doing.
No, I think it was just Kyiv because Kryvyi Rih does not look like that, man. Like Kryvyi Rih is kind of rough, honestly. It's kind of like an industrial town.
Oh hell!
Like let me show you. Let me show you. Like the big buildings in Kryvyi Rih are the churches. There's really no other like at least major buildings except for like the high-rise commie blocks. So those kinds of buildings are most likely in Kyiv. But beyond that, though. Still pretty wild to see he was out there without like any bodyguards or anything like that. He was literally just hanging out in the square. They got to be somewhere though, because there's no way he's out there just with no one around. But anyways, with that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the second segment of this stream where we get to talk to all of y'all. And it actually was a long enough speech that we were able to get into some shenanigans off air. And Matthew, tell everyone what we cooked up really quickly to try and munch on during the middle of that speech.
Let me tell the people. Here's what we cooked up, people. We cooked up the little side thing that comes with the Hello Freshes. Some little chocolate cake thing that comes free with it. That's what I got, personally. I need to enforce you got one, too.
Man, you said there, cut it off quick. You're trying to get back to eating that thing, ain't you?
No, I'm not eating it now. I just got it sitting over there in the corner letting it simmer.
Man, honestly, these things are hot, man. Like, after 45 seconds, those things get, like, to, like, a pretty decent hot temperature. I was trying to get another bite of mine, but I was like, damn, that thing is scorching at this point. But beyond that, it is time for us to move on into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. And of course, as y'all know, it is always a segment full of fun and joy, pleasure, and true fun. It's just a segment that we always get to enjoy every single night, because we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all about quite literally anything and everything that y'all want to talk about, except for politics and religion. And of course, I gotta say that it's a wonderful thing, a truly incredible thing, and also I see that a lot of people are apparently talking about some sort of a question that Matthew asked y'all about 30 minutes ago. Should the United States offer to overthrow Putin on behalf of the Russian people? And it appears that there's actually a little bit of a split here. The 45% of y'all say that's not our place to do that, and 35% of y'all say yes. But Matthew, I got to understand here. What is everyone saying, and what are you thinking about that as well? Because that is probably a much closer poll than I thought we were going to see. So what do we got?
All right, so just to reiterate the question, it says, should the United States offer to overthrow Putin on behalf of the Russian people? 45% said that's really not our place to do that, while 35% said yes, Russia wants to be freed from Putin, and 13% said no, Russia actually likes Putin's leadership. And honestly, I'm not really sure how the Russians really feel about Putin, because there are no real elections that happen inside of Russia, and he's a dictator. So nobody really has a real say on whether or not they like him. Navalny had to say he didn't like Putin at all, but he kind of like died in a prison. So that pretty much happens to everybody that doesn't like Putin. So in reality, I would assume that most people probably don't want Putin to be there. I would assume that, but that's a bold assumption to make, because I really don't know how the Russians really feel about him. But you would think that after all their sons and daughters go to get killed in a foreign war that is not necessary by any means inside of Ukraine, you'd think they would really hate him after that point, but there's just no telling. So I'm kind of unsure. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say, it's really tough. I don't really know. Because I don't really believe it is our place to really overthrow governments. But at the same time, considering that this is a rival government, I would say that this is one of the times where I'd be like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So part of me says, yes, we should overthrow them, whether the Russian people want it or not. And the other part says, that's not really our place to do that. We'll just deal with the cards we're dealt and deal with Russia under Putin. Because there is a old saying, I forgot where it came from, but it was some story about a village boy. And the village boy was growing up as a kid, and some monk in some town gave him a pony. And, that sounds great, right, Matthew? Like, everyone in the village was like, oh, that's great. This monk gave him this pony, right? You know what the monk said?
Sure. You can't have that pony.
He said, we will see. And then the kid went and rode the pony, and he ended up falling off and breaking his leg. And all the villagers of the town, they came together and they said, oh, this is terrible. He broke his leg. This is absolutely horrendous. A terrible thing that could have happened. It's unfortunate. And you know what the monk said?
Please don't sue me for negligence.
We will see. Then a war broke out. And during the war, the army of one of the sides came to this village and conscripted all of the able-bodied men into the army. And the village boy, he couldn't get put into the army because his leg was broken. And everyone said, "Oh, this is a great thing, his leg being broken, because he wasn't able to be conscripted into the war. He was pretty much saved from this horrific tragedy of this conflict." And you know what the monk said?
I don't care about your leg.
We will see. And it just keeps going on and on and on. So basically the thing is, and also Stephen Gerard said, that's in Charlie Wilson's for. Yes, it is. And it's a very interesting quote. It's actually, I believe it's from Tibet, if I remember correctly. It's a Tibetan quote, if I'm not mistaken. But they did include it in that movie, and I've seen that movie a couple of years back. But beyond that, that actually, I got that from the movie as well, just to let you know. And that was a very interesting kind of a quote, because really the whole basis of it, and it actually is a real one, is that the actions of now have unforeseen consequences in the future that could be good or bad, no matter what. So you really do not know what will be coming down the pipeline based on the actions of right now. Who's to say if we overthrow Putin, which would be a good thing right now, it could be a far worse thing down the road later. And who's to say if he's still there right now, that could not be a worse thing down the road or a better thing from right now. It's really hard to gauge that because there's many unforeseen consequences to trying to overthrow Putin, and there's many unforeseen consequences of him staying there. But really, we kind of know a lot more about him staying there versus him being thrown out. So what would happen if he was thrown out? Would there be a worse evil that shows up, or would it get better? We just don't really know. But anyways, with that in mind, I hope that does address that fairly well, or at least kind of throw up the conundrum that would be created from that kind of a question. But before we move on from that, I do want to say that I saw someone say something really interesting in the chat. And let's see. Where in the world did it go? Man, the chat's still moving fast. Alan Schultz said, "How's the weather where you are?" I actually included something in this. I also wanted to show this because I just think this is such a interesting part of the United States of America's, I guess you could largely call it, satellite imagery systems in orbit. The United States has the most complex and largest amounts of satellites that are currently in orbit. It really is a feat of the United States that we've been able to do such a thing. We've really conquered low Earth orbit for the large part, and even outer Earth orbits where some of these satellites are. But we had a satellite that actually swept over the South just a little while ago, and it actually took a picture from space of what the Gulf Coast is looking like right now, considering that a lot of y'all know that the Gulf Coast, for the first time in human history, or at least recorded history within the area, was under a blizzard warning, and we actually got a picture of what it looks like. And crazily enough, we're not in it.
Whoa, look at that. That's crazy. That's snow on the ground?
That is snow in the bayou, snow in the Mobile Bay, snow along the Mississippi coast, and snow all the way around Florida.
Now, I saw pictures coming out of Destin. Like, Destin, Florida was like literally the beaches were covered with snow, which I would have never expected to see that in a million years, but that was crazy to see that, especially on like satellite.
And let's see, someone said they got this en route to Miami. So here's some of the snow on the ground as well around I would assume the Miami area, most likely just dead on the nail. But wild to see. It's just crazy to see this because the bayou is covered in snow. The thing that's funny about kind of the whole bayou Cajun sort of a Christmas culture is that they never get snow. So you know what it's about, Matthew. It's like the tacky Christmas decorations in the middle of like the swampy like vegetation, and now that's just not the case. They actually got snow around Christmas time this year, and a lot of it. It was about 4 or 5 inches of the stuff. And so it's really crazy to see that. It's just weird. It's so freaking weird. But even crazier, man, you can actually see where the snowstorm finally started to veer north because of the winds. Because you can see that the southern areas of, I think it's Apalachicola, if I'm correct. And let me come down here and see. Yeah, it is Apalachicola. You can see that the Apalachicola area was spared because the snowstorm literally just veered about 45 degrees north and east and just started traveling up into Georgia and towards South Carolina.
Now, here's an interesting thought. What if it starts turning to where it starts snowing down here all the time or something, and when a hurricane comes in, it's not like a hurricane like we usually expect, it's like a really, really horrid blizzard hurricane?
Huh, that's interesting. I don't know what that would be. Like, that would be bizarre if that happened. But That is an interesting and thought-provoking question, Matthew. One that will require a study to be able to find out the answer to. Maybe a study that costs tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. But some of y'all are saying, where in the world are y'all? Were y'all affected by the snow? No, actually, we were not affected by the snow. The snow really affected everything south of Atmore in Alabama. And just to give you a little bit of an Alabama geography lesson, this is Atmore right here, which is a significant landmark for anyone living in Alabama, because if you ever travel south or north on I-65, you'll know of the Wind Creek Casino at Atmore. You can see it from the interstate. And also the only prison in the state of Alabama that conducts executions that are ordered by the state, you know, when a death warrant is issued, is actually conducted at the Holman Prison, just a little bit north of Atmore, right here. So Atmore's a little bit of an interesting place in the state of Alabama. But beyond that, this is really where the snow started, and then it went south from there. So it kind of covered the entirety of the fishtail of Alabama, which is this little area down here, and then it also covered the panhandle of Florida. But by the time it was getting towards Apalachicola, it turned north and east, so it kind of grazed Tallahassee, which is the capital of the state of Florida, a little bit, but then moved on up into Georgia and on up towards South Carolina. So it didn't really get us. You can actually see Birmingham on the satellite. You can actually see two major cities on the satellite picture. Birmingham's up here where the mouse cursor is. That's where we're at. So the snow actually got everything kind of south of us, but it did not get us. So we were perfectly fine, no snow. And you can also see the Dallas-Fort Worth area over here, which completely eclipses Birmingham, Alabama in size. I mean, this thing looks like
that's that view is kind of like freaky looking. I didn't know it was like looking at an area that large. I didn't know that was Dallas over there.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird when, you know, there's no labels on anything. You're just looking at the entire area. Like, this is the Mississippi River Delta, like this area around it that kind of looks like brownish, like the dirt and stuff. That's the Mississippi River Delta heading all the way down into the bayou. And so I think Jackson, Mississippi is right there. Yeah, it is. Actually, that is Jackson, Mississippi that I was putting my mouse cursor on right there. So that's Jackson, Mississippi. And then Shreveport's right there, because that is the Red River, I believe, that runs through Shreveport. And I don't really know of any other major cities that I can see through here. And of course, New Orleans is down here, and Baton Rouge is somewhere around here. And then there's a couple of other towns like Lafayette and all that down there. And then Mobile.
It's a pretty big development for the Gulf of America.
Man, I'm telling you. But you know something else that's really interesting? You can finally see it, Matthew, from this satellite picture, all that brown murky water that's always coming out of the Mississippi River, and how it just kind of literally comes right up into the Alabama Bay area, the Mobile Bay area, and kind of just affects the waters around there. Or really, that's just the sediment from the Alabama River coming out in the Mobile Bay.
Yeah, water's nasty right there. It kind of like goes around to the Biloxi area too. Kind of makes it nasty as well.
Yeah, look at the Biloxi water, man. It's just brackish and nasty up there. Like it's And then all of the Floridian waters are just like crystal clear. You can see that even on the satellite picture. There really isn't a lot of sediments that are coming down. And also those sediments are really tricky, because you would think, you know, it's just murky water. It's just kind of like some sediment from the river being brought down. But those rivers are carrying a decent amount of pretty toxic stuff, like a lot of nitrogen, because of fertilizer wash off further on up in the United States, especially in the Mississippi River. A lot of that nitrogen in the fertilizer will wash off into the Mississippi River through all the tributaries and all of that business. And so the Mississippi River is constantly pouring out loads of nitrogen into the Gulf of Mexico. And when it does that, it's bringing forward enough nitrogen and actually can end up killing off a decent amount of fish. And if this nitrogen starts to amalgamate in any specific area for a long amount of time, it creates a atmosphere really that has no oxygen in the surrounding area, and that creates the red algal blooms that a lot of people are starting to see more frequently these days down here in the Gulf. So that's where the red algal blooms are kind of coming from for the large part. They happen naturally, but they're getting bigger because of the amount of nitrogen wash-off that's going into the Gulf of Mexico from all of the agricultural wash-off that's ending up in the Mississippi. So a little bit of an interesting fun fact for y'all to know if y'all didn't know that. And that's starting to become a bit of an issue, because now the government, moving on, like, I know a lot of people always hear it presented as the interests of business versus the interests of ecologically concerned people, but there's actually a bit of a battle going on right now in the government, not really in between those two camps, but in between the business camps, because all of the fisheries of the Gulf of Mexico are once again under threat from these algal blooms, which are very dangerous for local fisheries because they can kill off their literal business, which is fishing inside the Gulf of Mexico for different kinds of sea life. Then there's the business interests of all of the major farms that largely exist and are successful because of the massive amounts of fertilization that they do throughout the area of the Midwest. So the government right now is kind of in the battle in between who's going to be prioritized, the fisheries in the Gulf or the farms in the Midwest. And they're kind of having to come up with a choice at this point as to who's going to kind of get the short end of the stick at this point or not, because one of them is going to get affected. Either they have to cut down on the amount that these companies are able to use nitrogen-based fertilizers, which would cut down crop production and overall crop productivity in the United States, but at the same time, it would allow for the fisheries to flourish inside of the Gulf of Mexico, or they have to do it the other way around, where the Gulf of Mexico's fisheries still get devastated by the red algal blooms, then in return, the farms are able to flourish, and the crop production remains at its steady level that it's at right now. So it's a bit of an interesting thing what they're having to do with that. And also, Burnaby Alex said you can protect both. Technically, you can, but the issue with that is that it may end up becoming a bit more expensive to do that, because nitrogen-based fertilizers are used primarily because they're highly effective and they're cheap. If you try and change that up a little bit, also nitrogen is something that's crucial for rapid growth and crop development. So that's also the other reason why nitrogen is used. You can use alternatives that wouldn't be as damaging or polluting for the fisheries in the Gulf, but that will come at a higher cost. And that may end up making food prices around the United States rise slightly because they're having to accommodate the rising costs of the different kinds of fertilizers. So there's always a balance that has to be stricken with everything, and it's a bit of a tough one at the moment. They're trying to figure out what direction it's going to be heading in. But it's a tough one. It's an interesting one for sure. Anyways, let's see here. I see some people saying, what are you going to call it? Matthew's actually throwing up a question on that, and it looks like most people are just going to keep calling it the Gulf of Mexico, kind of like how, Fort Benning's called Fort Benning and Mount McKinley's Mount McKinley. People are just going to keep calling them what they are, and some people are saying that they're going to call it the Gulf of America. So, Matthew, what are you thinking, and what is your opinion on that? What are you going to call it from this point forward?
All right, so this is a debate of the ages, kind of like the Twitter thing. Are you going to call it X or are you going to call it Twitter? I still call X Twitter because X sounds a little bit off. But 66% said they're going to call it the Gulf of Mexico, while 34% said the Gulf of America. And you might notice that Google has not changed it to Gulf of America because I'm not sure if there's another process that has to be done to actually rename it the Gulf of America, but it looks like Google's not abiding by it for whatever reason. So I'm going to keep calling it the Gulf of Mexico because everybody's going to know what that is. If we say Gulf of America, people are going to either think you're crazy or they're going to have no clue what you're talking about. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm going to keep calling the Gulf of Mexico simply because that's what it was called when I was a kid growing up, and I don't change things based off of what other people want. Like when one last president said, "Oh, we're going to have to rename all the bases in the South," I was like, "That's dumb. I'm just going to keep calling them what they are." And when also, I don't even know when the hell they did this, but they renamed Mount McKinley to Denali, which is the original name that was given by the natives of those lands. But I grew up calling it Mount McKinley. So, misfortune for them, but I'm going to keep calling it Mount McKinley because that's what I know it is.
They actually didn't name it after, the Indians, what they said they were trying to call it. They named it after that GMC truck, the Denali.
Oh, get the hell out of here.
The Yukon's right next to it. Like, they literally made that right next to Denali. It was like right there in Yukon.
Man, you're crazy. You're crazy, man. You're crazy.
General Motor Company, man. They're great at renaming stuff.
Man, they're great, honestly. They do a great job. But the Gulf of Mexico was called the Gulf of Mexico when I was a kid. It's been called that for 100 years before the nation was even founded. I'm going to keep calling it the Gulf of Mexico. It's just what it is. Also, that kind of changes the whole feel. Like, I'll be honest with y'all, like, here's my take on the whole renaming idea, or even if it hasn't been moved forward, which I think it may have been because the state of Florida is already stating that it's the Gulf of America. That sounds really corporatized. Like, Gulf of Mexico sounded natural. It just kind of was what it was. You didn't have to put a lot of thought into it. You have to really put mental thought into trying to make sure that in your head you rename it to the Gulf of America. Nobody has ever called the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Ever. Like, nobody has. So why in the world would people, like there's no push for that. It's not like people were going, oh, like this land that was called La Cucaracha is actually called New Mexico by the Americans. So we're going to rename it that because that's what everyone in America calls it. It's not like that. It's not like that at all. Everyone called it the Gulf of Mexico. So it doesn't make any sense to rename it. It's a renaming that people are going to have to go out of their way to try and relearn. It's kind of like how daylight savings time is also largely useless. It's like, why not just change? Like that's something I could get behind changing. It's like, why not change that? That was made for farmers. Farmers only make up 1% of the population at this point. Most people don't even know what the hell daylight savings time even is for anymore. So it's like, why not change that? Because now most people don't really, follow that. So that would make sense. But changing this, it's not like there was already a massive population of people in America saying that this was the Gulf of America. Literally everyone was calling it the Gulf of Mexico until like a day or two ago. And now some people want to act like, oh, it's always been the Gulf of America. It's like, who the hell in America has ever gone, man, I'm real pissed that the Gulf of Mexico is called that. Like, I've never heard anyone say that. I live here around the Gulf of Mexico. Most people who ever go on vacation to the beach where I'm from go to the Gulf of Mexico. Never have heard anyone complain about the name. So what's the point of the change? Like, I don't know.
So let's see. Somebody said the Gulf of Cocaine. I mean, it could be with all the narco subs hanging out in the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, it could be the Gulf of Cartel, more like it. They might rename it themselves eventually. Now that they're getting a little bit feisty. Now that they got named a terrorist organization in Mexico. Kind of interesting on that one. But also, by the way, somebody else said something. Somebody was talking about that La Cucaracha. Isn't that a song, by the way? Like,
I think
I've
so.
heard that somewhere.
Yeah, I think it is.
Can you tell us like how to go?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I just remember the name, and I was trying to come up with something. But like once again, though, I want to also throw this out there. The names of most of the southwestern states of the United States are from their time under Spanish rule. Like, we didn't rename them when we moved into these areas. Like, we didn't rename Colorado, which means Red River, into something else that sounded more American. We didn't do that. And we didn't do that to Texas or Arizona or Nevada or California or Utah. It's literally just named what it was named when it was controlled by the Spanish. The general naming convention is that whoever was there first kind of got to name it. So if you're Mexico was here first, technically, under New Spain, so the Gulf of Mexico was named after them. That's just how it is. Like, you don't go and rename stuff later. That's just what it was. That's what it will be. It's kind of like how no one got to really name Virginia except for the English settlers that arrived and named it after the Virgin Queen, which I believe was Queen Mary, and they called it Virginia for that reason. No one's coming and changing that now. Like, it just got named that, and that's what it will be. The same thing with Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New Jersey. If it's called that, whoever got there first and named it, and that's what it is, and that's what it stays. No point in changing it at this point. If you're changing it, it doesn't really seem to make much sense. Like, I'm behind, like, supporting our presidents and all of their ventures. They're elected by the people, by majority, to represent the wishes of the nation abroad. But when it comes to things like this, like one president renaming all of the bases in the South, and also a mountain, and then another president coming in and trying to rename a gulf, I can't get behind that. It's like, this is silliness. We got other things to pay attention to than this.
Also, by the way, apparently La Cucaracha means the cockroach. So that's about to become Hot Dog Man's anthem. We're about to be singing the La Cucaracha, La Cucaracha.
There goes another 1,000.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
Oh, man. Oh, man. You know what? I actually see a good naming nomination. The Gulf of Hok-Tuh.
Oh, no.
Also,
Gulf of Rug Pool.
Man, someone said, man, I call Manhattan, let's see, I call New York New Amsterdam. I mean, you're not wrong, like, technically, but then the British came in and they kind of tore down New Amsterdam, and then they built New York on top of its ruins. Like, so that's kind of why it's called New York. But yeah, that's kind of an interesting point. Why not rename New York to New Amsterdam? Why not? There's a lot of Dutch people up there, I think. There's not actually any Dutch people there. I don't even know who the hell's in New York at this point, but there's a lot of people. There's millions of them. But anyways, with that, let's see. Gulf of cryptocurrency. You know what? That's what we need to call it. The Gulf of Ethereum or something like that.
The Gulf of Solana.
The Gulf of trending agua. it's
the
like
Gulf of very, very shady meme coin.
The Gulf of despair. The Gulf of hate. It's like the Gulf of anger. Like, it's something
the Gulf
like that.
of give me your money.
The Gulf of look, Jack. I mean, I was in the hells of Xi Jinping or something like that. But oh man. Well, let's see. It's kind of like the USA renaming Mexico. We never did that. Like, we never did that. We never renamed Mexico.
We never renamed Mexico.
Mexico was always
said that?
Mexico. Let's see. Andrew Tate. It's kind of like the USA renaming Mexico.
Man,
We
Andrew,
never
we didn't
did
rename
that.
Mexico, man. We're not laying claim to Mexico like that. Come on, man.
Mexico,
Come on, Jack.
Mexico was a province of New Spain, declared independence from Spain, rebelled, and then created Mexico as largely the state that seceded New Spain. So that is how it worked. We didn't name Mexico. Mexico named itself. But let's see. Let's see here. It's such a it's such a nice Gulf. Never seen a Gulf like it. People come from around the world and go, wow, that's a great Gulf. And I go, that's an absolutely wonderful Gulf. Nobody could beat this Gulf. Nobody can even get close to it. Not even the Gulf of California, an absolutely horrendous Gulf. Nobody's ever even seen California on that Gulf. There is no California except for the Baja California. I heard they make a great drink, Baja Blast. Great drink.
but they say, let's take a boat down to the Gulf of Mexico. That's what they said, the Gulf of Mexico. They said, let's go down there to Puerto Rico and go check out the water.
And then they said, let's make this god-awful dog after this entire area called Chihuahua. Absolutely terrible dog. Pisses and shits on everything. Really mean. I don't like him.
Oh, they yap and yap and yap. Oh, they're just so loud. Oh, so loud. Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you this. It yaps more than Rosie O'Donnell. Rosie O'Donnell, just can you not stop yapping like a chihuahua, like a chihuahua, absolutely like a chihuahua. Don't we always hate chihuahuas? Don't we hate chihuahuas. We're just terrible dogs, terrible dogs.
No. Actually, chihuahuas love me. Nobody loves me more than the chihuahuas. Nobody. Nobody has more pull with me than the chihuahuas. That's right.
I gotta tell you, I love the chihuahuas. I love the little tacos that they make. They're great chihuahuas.
Aren't the chihuahuas just the best group you've ever seen? I mean, look at those chihuahuas. Look at those cute chihuahuas. Look.
We're gonna build a pound and we're gonna put all of the like it's something like that. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it well. Having a good bit of fun there. Some people are gonna be like, "Hey, that's political." What do you mean, Jack? We've been doing this voice for like 3 years, like along with the other one. It's the same thing. We've been doing it forever.
The moment we start talking about the chihuahuas, they turn the cameras off. Look, they're turning them off. They don't want to see. They don't want to let you see the chihuahuas. No.
They're about to put us on that.
I'll get political.
They're about to put us on that fake news. They're about to get really political. Like it's like there's going to be some guy whose name rhymes with ho that's going to put a community post out on us like for doing this. It's like, but anyways, still. I gotta say, it's been a fun thing to do. We'll absolutely love it. And also we love to riff. I wish that we could riff more, but sadly, well, actually not really sadly, we actually have a lot of questions to get to, and the questions are absolutely a boot of fun. So with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat here, this one is going to go to Hokey Redneck, who puts in a $50 donation, and thank you very much, Hokey Redneck, for that support. Also, Blat just came in and said, y'all not funny, y'all are just old and sour. I'm 24 years old. Apparently, think I'm like 50 or something like that. So dumb bot. But anyways, back to
the
Hokey's...
Chinese netizen just arrived. Old. He's like banned. It's like.
Also, what's wrong with being old? And anyways, if you're sour, that means you're not laughing. So you're just wrong all the way around. What the hell? But anyways, back to Hokey's super chat. That $50 donation. Thank you very much, Hokey, for that $50 support. He said, "Rabbit hole." Oh, rabbit hole. He said, "Andrew, will you talk about the Finnish-Soviet World War II gear and the smackdown that the Soviets got in the White Peace?"
Yes. So back in the day, Stalin was really impressed with Adolf Hitler invading Poland, and they also did that at the same time. But the Soviet plan was really simple. The Germans' plan was really complex. So Stalin wanted to flex and show the world that they were as advanced militarily as the Germans. So what they did is that they planned to annex Finland. So they built up their army. It was about 800,000 strong on the border of Finland, declared war on them at the latter part of 1939, pretty much at the start of winter. And over the next 4 or 6 months or so, the Finns slaughtered them. I believe they ended up killing about 300,000 Russians. It was a horrendous thing, and they really didn't gain a lot. The White Peace only ceded about 10% of Finland's land, but once again, reminding everyone, the Soviets planned on annexing Finland, and they only got 10% of Finland by the end of it. So it appears they kind of failed. You know, it cost them a lot of lives. They didn't really achieve anything. It was generally a failure. And then right after that, the Nazi Germans then invaded them and really started the Great Patriotic War for them. And that's kind of when the Soviets were like, wow, we kind of like screwed ourselves over here, because we not only purged all of our best officers, but we also kind of got a lot of the remainder killed in Finland for no reason. And then the Finns actually joined the war on Nazi Germany's side to try and reclaim their own land. And then at the end of the war, they actually ended up ceding just a little bit more of it to the Soviets, because they ended up getting pushed back a little bit once again. But anyways, beyond that, I hope that does address that a little bit fairly well, at least the short end of the story. But the Russians got smacked. I mean, like, it was so bad, everyone took the Soviets as an embarrassment before World War II really kicked off for them, because it went that poorly. Everyone was like, wow, the Soviets just suck. And it was always a series of the Soviets just sucking at everything they would do, because, like, they built, like, let me see here. Here we go. They built this thing. Some of y'all may know what I'm talking about here, because you know, I'm big into trains, so I got to share this with y'all. I got to share this with y'all. I have to. Let me make sure that I can. Yeah. So this is good. So, anyways, this is the AA-20. And this was the biggest locomotive that the Soviet Union ever built. They built it because America, at the same time. And let me see here. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to rake my brain, because this was built in 1934. This was around the same time that I believe Allegheny, well, not Allegheny, I believe it was the Norfolk and Western built their first Allegheny, and Union Pacific was working on their Challengers and Big Boys, which, you know, a lot of y'all would know, they're prides of the United States. Like, let me just go pull up that Big Boy. Not Big Boy Shoney's. We want the Big Boy locomotive. Here we go. So this is the Big Boy, everyone knows, the pride of the nation, truly a locomotive engineering masterpiece. I believe the Challenger locomotive came before it. Yep. So this was about the time that the Soviets would build their piece of shit. So the Union Pacific and a whole bunch of other companies were building these articulated super locomotives that had thousands of horsepower, and they were like, wow, that's just so cool. I bet, like, we have to show the world that the Soviet Union can do the same thing, and we can haul all of this tonnage. So what they did was they built this thing called the Andreev, which was not articulated. It was a 414-4 locomotive. This thing doesn't even fall within the normal classifications, because it has 7 driving wheels on each side. That's just insane. Like, no one does that. And that's stupid, because it can't even really go around a turn. So the Soviets were like, ah, yes, we've done it. We've created the best locomotive in the world. It was so heavy, it would literally bend the tracks out of shape under it, wherever it went. It couldn't make turns, so it had to literally just travel in a straight line everywhere. It couldn't even really turn itself around because of how big and how much of a fat ass this thing was in the locomotive world. It was a failure. They eventually ended up scrapping it. They retired it from service within a year, and then ended up scrapping it decades later, because that's the Soviet way. But that happened really at the same time the Winter War was happening. So for the Russians, well, for the Soviets, they were just taking fat L's all day up until World War II, because everything they did just sucked. Like, it was terrible. Anyone looking at this thing would know it was terrible, because a wheelbase that long just would never work. And they tried it, and it failed. Like let me show you this. The Challengers and the Big Boys are different, because both of those are articulated, meaning that really what this is, it's 2 locomotives under one frame. They have one lead locomotive up here and one back here. So technically this is 2 engines under one boiler. The boiler produces steam for both of those engines, but both of those engines run separately. The Soviets built one engine under one boiler, and the thing was so freaking long, and also heavy, it would not work. Ever. So that was a great fail, at least in the locomotive world. But they also had a million other fails as well at the same time. But it just crazy. Like, it was absolute insanity in Soviet Union during that time. And that was also the time of Stalin. So the insanity was unmitigated, because no one could just tell them that's stupid. They had to do what he was saying. So anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Thank you once again for support, Hokie Redneck, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope I was able to teach some of y'all a little bit about how the Soviets were catching fat L's right before World War II. And so with that, thank you once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, I ran a poll here. It says, how young are you, as opposed to how old are you? So I missed an age bracket here. I didn't put the 50 to 60 age bracket, so I'm sorry. If you're in that age bracket, your vote doesn't count. The poll's rigged. But 36% said 40 to 50 years young, while 32% said 60 plus years young. 18% said 30 to 40 years young, and only a mere 14% are in our age bracket of 20 to 30 years old, young. So how about that? Only 15%, the smallest bracket is the one that we're in. That's kind of interesting. But very interesting age stats here. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta say, very interesting to hear. That's actually much more different than our actual YouTube stats in our analytics tab shows us. It actually shows a fairly different skew. But that's still very interesting to hear. Most of y'all, I think, would be considered millennials or Gen X, I think. But according to our stats, most of y'all would be considered boomers, interesting enough. Most people are over the age of 55 to 60 that watch this channel, although that's kind of technically the beginning of like Generation X, I think, as well. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Very interesting to see that kind of an age demographic breakdown, though. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the next one. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our next one here is going to go to Hokey Redneck once again, and he dared to take us back down the rabbit hole yet again. He puts in a 50, and thank you very much, Hokey, for that support. He says, can you look up the NNWA class too?
I'm already ahead of you. I got it right here. And look at that thing. Look at that thing. It's an articulated locomotive. There was a lot of them, actually. A lot of people think that the big boy was the only one, but there was loads and loads of these things that were designed and produced by multiple locomotive shops. Interestingly enough, this was actually built by the Roanoke shops. It wasn't built by Baldwin or Alco or any of the other major manufacturers at the time. But still, these things are pretty neat. I don't really know a lot about the class personally. I generally know a lot more about the Alleghenies, not these. But still, these are fairly interesting, and I have seen them in some pictures and reference material from time to time. But let's see here. Let me see if I can show you all this. Also, Matthew, do you know what the Norfolk and Western turned into?
Norfolk and Western? Norfolk Southern.
It did. You're absolutely dead on the nail. It turned into Norfolk Southern. And let me see, Norfolk Southern. And so let me show you this. Norfolk Southern was a merger of Norfolk and Western and Southern Railway into Norfolk Southern. So it was a combination of the two railroads. And let me see if I can show you. Let's see here. Dang, man. Some of these Wikipedia articles, man, are just so skewed. This is like, you know, Norfolk Western has a very, like, decent amount of history behind it. And then they have an entire thing for the East Palestine derailment that takes up, like, a quarter of the page. It's like, come on. It's like...
Also, what does it say? It has a excessive amount of intricate detail that only interests a particular audience. They even put a note on that.
Yeah, it's like, I don't really get what the point of putting that in was, like, at least that much about it. Because it's like, that could be a completely different page. But anyways, beyond that, Norfolk Southern's livery is kind of a combination of the two, but more so the Southern Railways livery, which was one of the major railway companies that actually provided railroad service for our part of the United States, which was the South. So this is it. Southern Railway, right there. That was their logo. Pretty cool.
Oh, it says it serves the South.
Yeah, it just said, like, their motto was literally Southern serves the South. That was, like, their little company motto. Kind of cool, actually. But their livery was insanely cool, like, really drippy. They called it the tuxedo livery, and they also had the green one as well. But this is kind of like the tuxedo livery look. But that's what really, like, turned into Norfolk Southern. Just, like, slight modifications to that livery. So that's pretty neat. But beyond that, that's what Norfolk Southern is made up of today. But I actually was looking a lot into this company because I've always focused on Louisville and Nashville, which was one of our other major kind of rail companies in this area, along with Atlantic Seaboard. But Southern Railway is the one that I'm kind of interested in recently because it was what turned into Norfolk Southern, and also it was a huge railroad at the time. Let me see if I can find y'all. Also, by the way, Matthew, I forgot to tell you this as well. Southern Railway was the one that actually ran the Southern Crescent, which is the modern-day Amtrak Crescent, which still comes through Birmingham.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. And so they named it Crescent after Crescent.
Yeah, they took out the Southern and they just named it the Crescent, but it's still based off of the Southern Railways service that was picked up by different companies along the way, but it went from New York to New Orleans. But originally, what's actually really cool about this as well is that originally the actual Crescent, the real Crescent, not the modern day Amtrak one, actually went through Montgomery, Alabama instead of Birmingham, Alabama. But later on, while Southern was still running it, like I think it was during the 50s, they changed it to Birmingham because Birmingham was the larger city.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's actually pretty cool. So at some point, like, because we're kind of like, just not to let y'all know the lore side of things, we're kind of from Montgomery, but back in the day, the Crescent actually used to run through Montgomery Union Station, which we've seen a million times growing up. So, really cool kind of a fact about that. But anyways, moving on from that, this thing is pretty cool. Let's see, what are the stats on this thing? Um, Damn, a driver diameter of 70 inches. So the drivers on this thing, which are the larger running wheels right here, those things are approximately about 6 feet tall each. So they're huge. I mean, that's like the size of a small car right there on each driver.
That's a big boy right there.
Man, that thing's big.
They actually had a big boy locomotive too,
Oh, yeah. And this thing was 121 feet long, including the tender. So this thing was about a third the length of a football field.
Now,
so
that's long.
Yeah, that thing's huge. Let's compare that to the big boy. Why not? Since, let's see, big boy locomotive. There's a million things called big boy. So this one, let's see here, length. We want to know with the tender. So overall, this one's 132 feet. So it's actually about 10 feet longer than the Class A's of Norfolk and Western. Man, it's honestly crazy to think of the size of these things. They're insanely huge. I think the length of the big boy nowadays is equivalent about to the length of 2 modern diesel locomotives, like the larger mainline ones combined. But these things also have power that's unmatched. Like the big boy has, I think, around 6,500 horsepower. Your average modern day mainline diesel has, I think, about 4,000 or somewhere around that mark. So this thing was about as powerful as 1.5 of the modern diesel locomotive, and these things were torqued to hell. Steam power is amazing for torque, and so if you ever really want to like get the most out of low speed pulling power, steam is really the way to go. And so even in the modern day, what's really cool is that back in 2023, a mainline diesel freight, like an actual running one in revenue service on a Union Pacific main line, got stuck on an upgrade, meaning that it was going uphill. So they actually got the big boy to pull up behind the freight locomotive or the freight train, couple to it, and push it up the hill, because the big boy has that kind of power behind it that it can actually pretty much just push the whole freight train in front of it uphill. Thing's amazing. Like, it truly is still incredible technologically, even in the modern day, what this thing is capable of, or really any of the articulated locomotives were capable of. They were just amazing feats of engineering for what steam power could be at its best. So with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well, but we're going to move on so that way we can get on to some more questions, so that way I'm not sitting here and just boring most of y'all with train stuff all night, but still, it's fun stuff, at least for me. I'm kind of biased with that. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to the next. But a huge shout out once again to you, Hokey Redneck, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Trism666, who puts in a $25 donation, and thank you very much, Trism, for that support. And they said, with North Korean troops and supplies coming via rail, do you think Ukraine will add rail lines to their target list to cut of those supplied lines?
Unfortunately, targeting rail lines is a bit of a tough business. It's really hard to actually knock them out. It's actually a lot harder to knock out a railroad than it is an actual road. You can crater a road and largely knock a road out of service because roads require a pretty flat surface for road vehicles to use them effectively. If you crater them enough, they're largely unusable, kind of like a runway. Railroads, crazily enough, are very easy to repair. If you knock out a small segment of track, say 3 feet long, a repair crew can be by there within the next day or two and repair that railroad back into running service. So if you really want to impact a railroad, you're not really trying to target the railroad itself, or the road as it would be called in railroad terminology, because, a railroad in the railroad world is a road for a train, so it's just called a road. Really what you would want to target are the locomotives, because the locomotives are a lot less in number, a lot more rare, and actually hitting and destroying a locomotive is technically easier than knocking out the rails, but there's a caveat to that. It's pretty hard to actually destroy a locomotive. They're thousands of tons, well, hundreds of tons in most instances, sometimes over 1,000 tons. So while you can hit them, you kind of have to know where the fuel tank is to really cause some significant damage. And even then, the damage might not be that bad, and the locomotive could still be salvageable. You're just kind of knocking out a service temporarily. So railroads are kind of tough to target and knock out, to be entirely honest. You could hit bridges, Now, bridges really are a weak point. You can knock out a bridge, and it would take a good and long time to rebuild a bridge. But if they have any flat overland routes to detour locomotives through, they'll just send them that way. And so while you're kind of clogging and congesting the lines and lowering efficiency, you're not really ever going to be able to completely knock out a railroad like you would, say, any other form of transport, like an airport cratering the runway or cratering a roadway to knock out the roadway. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Very good question, though. But I do think they'll try and find some way to target the railroads, maybe rail yards, locomotives, or bridges, or some other form of critical infrastructure that's involved in the railroad in general. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my honest opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Barry Woodward, who puts in a $21 donation. And thank you very much, Barry, for that support as well and helping keep us running. I said, hey, you, earthly country leaders, be content with the facade of earth that God granted you, or F off and say hi to Satan as the door wanks your ass on the way out. Putin, paying attention?
That's a new one.
I don't even know.
That's a new one. I don't know how to respond to that one, but I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I think we're gonna have to be on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next one. This one goes to Mr. Shrewman Kid, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Mr. Shrewman, for that support. They said Cuba's even a little hostile country now, again, due to them allowing the docking of Russian warships a couple of years or so ago. What are your thoughts?
I'd have to say yes. They are a hostile country. That's why we re-implemented the sanction regimen that we had in the past on them again, and completely cut off any kind of travel or tourism or anything like that. Once again, to Cuba is because they are a hostile country, and I do believe that treating them as a hostile country is certainly appropriate at this point. By the way, little small tidbit. Do y'all know that there's actually a part of East Germany that still lives on to this day?
Oh, a little bit?
A little bit. It's actually an island in Cuba because Cuba gifted one of their islands to East Germany. And when East Germany fell, the Germans didn't include it in the reunification treaty in between West and East Germany. So technically, it's still East German. It's never been reclaimed by Germany. It's never been reclaimed by Cuba. So somewhere around here, there's an island that is still East German, but there's no one living on it or anything. It's just like a small little loophole kind of a thing. Really neat, but beyond that, not really pointless. Oh, hey, look, it's the Bay of Pigs. No way, we just ran up on it. That's crazy. Look, it's the Bay of Pigs right here, Matthew, and there's the little town, Playa Larga, where kind of the last stand went down. It actually went down kind of over here, around this burned out splotch, kind of around that area. There was actually a runway here at some point. I don't see it anymore. But anyways, moving on from that, we are on to the next one.
All right. They ought to try the Bay of Pigs again and see if we can get away with it this time. But anyways, moving on to our next one. Moving on to our next one here. This one goes to you, Hokey Redneck, once again, who puts in the 20. And thank you very much, Hokey, for that support. They said, save this for later or never, Matt. Okay, I mean, we can address it now. They said, but have either of you cow-tipped? Cow-tipped, what's that mean?
I don't think I ever have because I don't even really know what the term means. But let me go and pull it up. Let's see. I pulled up com tipping. Let me go change that.
What the hell?
Let's see. It's the idea of sneaking up on the sleeping cow and pushing it over. It's generally
considered... That sounds like a way to get killed.
It's considered an urban legend and is not supported by evidence.
I don't think you can do that.
Yeah, so I've never cow-tipped. I've never been around cows while they're sleeping. I've always been around them while they're awake. Because you know what they say. They see you when you're sleeping. They know when you're awake. And I think they were talking about Santa, but they could also be talking about that fat cow, Rosie O'Donnell. But with that, I hope that
does...
my
God.
But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. But thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, that was an impersonation. That was not the enforcer actually making that statement. Just an impersonation.
Yes.
But anyways, moving on here to our next one. This one goes to John Person, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, John, for that support as well. He said, thank you for your dedication, enforcers. And your knowledge of the history and the military hardware adds to so much depth of the news, and it keeps me coming back in LSA.
I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. Thank you for the kind words as well. We love to be able to come here on air every night and tell you all the news of what's happening day in and day out. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be able to do that, and I got to thank you so much significantly for enjoying what we're able to throw into the pie for the large part and share with you all about the news each and every day. It's an honor to be able to do this. I cannot say that enough, and it always is every single day we do it. And so with that, a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to none other than Jay Bagwell, channel legend, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Jay, for that support and also putting in the super chat. We appreciate it. He said, the French Navy, known for its excellence. This is the normal part. In all seriousness, you guys stuck your necks out for that prediction. Oh, we did for sure.
Oh, we did.
And then you're the only one YouTubers that got it right. And LSA, baby. And we did get it right. Now, to me and the Enforcer, we thought that was a pretty straightforward prediction on that one. But many people really, really doubted that. So it came true. What do you know? But Enforcer, what say you?
And it did come true. That's crazy when you think about it. We were literally the only people on the internet to get that right. Literally the only ones. Like, I cannot think of another channel that I know of. Maybe there is one out there I don't know of, but I can't think of another one that got it right, because everyone in the sphere, in one way or another, whether they like Ukraine or hate Ukraine or they're down the middle, they live in the modern political world, which really is detached from reality. And we've been saying that for so long. And I hope that that us being right on this may encourage some of the really political people in our audience, because there is a small amount of them on both sides, to really take a step back, seeing how things are going now, and to really just start looking at things kind of the way we do, in an apolitical way, because there's more sense to be had that way than there is any other way. Because if you sit back and you don't look at things politically, there are just clear and obvious ways that things will go, and there's really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's just that, Ukraine's support is prerogative to U.S. interests in Eastern Europe. It will continue, and that was the answer. It didn't matter who was going to be elected. It didn't matter whether it was going to be this guy or the candidate that lost. It was going to continue on the same way. It just had to. And so people were just giving us a ringer for it. I mean, like, people were going around and just beating the hell out of us for it in different ways. There was little jabs made at the channel here and there from others. And what's kind of interesting about that is that a lot of those channels that would jab us are really, really political channels. Like, they just shove politics down people's throats. And it's not like all one side. It's different sides that will do it. And they live in la la land. They live in fantasy land, because rhetoric is one thing. What you can actually do is another. There's people like, there's this guy that talks like this that hates Ukraine and thought that with the bringing forward this new president was going to put Ukraine down once and for all. Hell, we're going to invade Ukraine too. And he's probably getting his mind blown. I haven't checked on that guy recently, but he's probably getting his mind blown seeing that the president's now delivering an ultimatum to Russia today. And then the other group was saying, oh, he's a brutal dictator. He's going to appease. He's going to be like Neville Chamberlain because he loves Putin. And then he gave him an ultimatum. So I guess their heads are spinning today too. But if you had any sense, it didn't matter who was going to be elected. This was just the way it was going to go. And we said that for a year. I mean, people didn't believe us. Some people have legitimately, cussed us out and been banned on the channel that were longtime viewers sometimes because we said that. And then we ended up being right. I mean, it's already ending up being right in just 2 days of the guy being in office, and we were dead on the nail. And it's really just insane to see that, because I don't know. It's not really like we're talking to a huge audience tonight that didn't know us and we're like, see, we were right. Like, we're really just talking to all of y'all who were here for that entire year that we were saying that. But, once again, dead on the nail. If you take a non-political approach to things, you're able to find a much more practical answer to the kind of answers or solutions to what will be happening in the future. That's just the reality of things. It's just crazy how that works. And I gotta thank you, Jay Bagwell, for being one of those longtime viewers, an old guard, a channel legend, and actually a channel friend. And I gotta thank you for supporting the channel and pointing that out tonight, because we have to bring that up, because if I'm ever gonna toot our whistle on one thing that we got right, that was the biggest thing that we ever got right. Dead on the nail, quite literally. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Also, George Tencher said, that redneck voice you do sounds like some guy who is in some very questionable group. Well, that guy that we're trying to mimic, we're not going to ever say his name live on air, but the guy we're mimicking is actually a real YouTuber. And he, funnily enough, to give you all a little bit of lore that we just saw on the side and didn't tell anyone about, Hot Dog Man went on this guy's show because this guy hates us. So Hot Dog Man was like, oh boy, he hates the enforcers too. I'm going to go on his show. And then this guy tore into Hot Dog Man on his show, like treated him, pimped him out literally, and then also said some of the most like I think it was Hot Dog Man or someone else that was a guest on the show, but said like the most racist remarks that I've ever heard on YouTube that passed and was not banned right off the platform immediately.
Oh my God! Oh
Remember?
yeah. I know who you're talking about, man. It was the guy who got in the fight with Hot Dog Man. He was like the guy that said, "I want to give it all to the veterans." So it was that guy. Yeah, it was him. He said the most racist. I didn't even know YouTube allowed you to say stuff like that on YouTube. Like he was saying some racist stuff. I heard him say it. And I remember Hot Dog Man was sitting there the whole time, like getting berated the whole time. He started saying this racist stuff, and Hot Dog Man just sunk in his chair. So he didn't even know how to respond to it. I was listening, like, oh my God, what's this guy saying?
Dude, that guy was saying, "You're a stupid idiot. You're that." Wait a minute. I'm seeing too many of a certain kind of people here.
Yeah,
and
he said that live on air.
And he didn't say it like that, folks. He said it like a specific group was being targeted. And
he said it was some racist stuff behind it. Like, he meant it.
Dude, like he said it was some hate behind his voice. Like it was like, what the hell? And Hot Dog Man was blown away. Matthew was screaming for me to come. He was like, oh my God, he won't believe it. And like I came in, I was like, oh my God. I was like, this guy's got to get banned, and then he wasn't banned, and and it was just crazy.
Oh man, even the chat, even his own chat was going wild when he did that. Like his chat was going, "Oh my God, what the hell?" It even caught his own chat out of guard, man. That was crazy.
Lord. And then after, so to tell y'all something, because this is like such a fun piece of drama that we didn't even get to tell y'all about. But anyways, this guy rips Hot Dog Man a new one. Hot Dog Man thought he was going to get on there and have like a loving session with this guy about how they both hate us. But he didn't realize that this guy was going to eat him for lunch, and he did. And so then he kicked Hot Dog Man off air, and Hot Dog Man got kicked off, and he was trying to act like he was playing it off, but his voice was shaky, so he sat there and went, wow, wow, he kicked me off, wow. And then he tried to watch the guy. So then afterwards, Hot Dog Man tried the same tactic on us that on him. And so this guy called the police in his city on him and had a detective call him up and be like, hey, we need you to come down here and talk to us. And because Hot Dog Man has a record, an actual criminal record, he was scared to even go down there. So he hid from the police or something like that. It was something along those lines. And this guy went on a campaign to pretty much go out of his way to try and destroy Hot Dog Man, copyright strike his stuff because he showed his content without permission. But what was even crazier than that is that Hot Dog Man filmed his own side of the debate. And so the other dude copyright striked Hot Dog Man's own recordings of it, which he doesn't have copyright permissions to do that. So it was like a whole fiasco. And so they all got so scared of each other because Hot Dog Man was sticking his ravenous crowd on this dude, and this dude was calling police on this guy. They all stopped talking about each other and never talked about each other again. I wish we could get y'all some more details on that and tell you the names and stuff, but we're not going to give degenerates any of those, any kind of a recognition on the show about what their names are or anything like that. But it was very fun to watch the dogs eat each other outside, just sitting and looking out the window and be like, wow, look, they're eating each other, they're chewing each other up, and we just got to watch it. And and also another thing, I want to tell y'all how we knew that this guy hated us. Said this guy was running his show. I don't know why, but Matthew got on it because he was like, oh, look, oh man, I know why. There was another person we knew that was a guest on the show. And so Matthew was like, what the hell is this show about and what's going on over here? So he went and watched it. So he put in a comment on his Enforcer Matt account in that live chat. And then this dude who has that voice, he talks like this. He sat there and saw Enforcer Matt in the chat and said, is that those stupid guys that do those damn voices? I'm all for free speech, but I'm banning you. And then he banned Matthew out of the chat.
Yeah, Man, I went over there. I was trying to give some support to another Ukrainian YouTuber who, at the time, I was trying to go over there and let him know, oh, yeah, look, he's over here, like, trying to tell a non-Ukraine supporter why he should support Ukraine. I was like, oh, good on him for going over there and telling the guy and trying to inform him about Ukraine. So I go in there and say that, and this guy, the veterans, he decides to go crazy on me and stuff like that and do exactly what the enforcer said. And then kicks me out of the chat, bans me out of there. I'm like, what the hell is this guy's problem? And then I realized, oh, he's from Alabama. That's what his problem is. I'm like, I can sound like a redneck too if you want to. It's like, but anyways, then he went on Hot Dog Man's show, ripped him a new one.
No. Hot Dog Man came on his show, remember?
I thought he came on. Oh, that's right. Yeah, he did come on the show.
That guy
kicked him off. Yeah, he had to be able to kick him off the call. He punked Hot Dog Man so bad that Hot Dog Man was scared to speak. The guy was literally telling Hot Dog Man, "You'll be quiet and speak when I tell you to speak." And Hot Dog Man went, "Yes, ma'am."
Yes, sir.
And he went quiet the rest of the time, didn't say a word. And this guy just sat there like literally like chewing him a new, like, you know what. And I was like, damn, is Hot Dog Man gonna sit there through this whole thing, get chewed out? He did.
And he did.
All that big talk and stuff. He sat there and got chewed out the entire time and didn't say a single word. It's like, oh my God. And then the guy had the audacity, the gall to say, all right, well, I can see you're just too stupid to understand anything, so I'm going to kick you off this call and go talk to the veterans.
Oh, wait a minute. What's better is that this guy, now this, I want to tell you this. This guy says, I'm all for free speech. I love free speech. I think that everyone ought to be able to say what the hell they want, wherever the hell they want. And this guy would throw down ban hammers like we would. Like, but the thing is with us, we're like, no, like free speech is great, but that doesn't exist here in a private institution like this channel. Like, you can go say whatever you want in a public square, but this channel has rules. Like, we make that fairly clear. But this guy will sit there and talk about, I believe in free speech, and we have free speech right here on this show. And then he'd ban anyone who even said, I think this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You know, kind of like we would. And I was like, that is so crazy to have a disconnect like that, because when we do it, I'm like, yeah, you know, we have regulations, like we actually do. But this guy will sit there with regulations and then say that he's all for free speech, and in fact they have it there. It's like, that's just crazy. Like, that's literally being like disconnected from the reality of what you're doing.
Man, I just called a stray though when I went up in that guy's chat. Like, that guy got me with a stray. I didn't even see it coming. I'm not gonna lie. I came up in there and that dude acted like a fool. And then everybody in his chat started going crazy too. I'm like, oh damn, I'm infamous apparently. Everybody in this chat knows who I am and they're going crazy. And now the Mr. Veterangs, he's going crazy too and like trying to kick me out of the chat. I was like, damn, I didn't know this was gonna happen. But you know what's even interesting?
But you know what's even the kick, dude? He changed his profile picture, as you know, to his face, and he looks like the Minecraft pig. Like, he really does. And I'm like, that's not a good look. Like, change it to something else. Like, putting that mug up in a profile picture, like, look, I know I'm not the best looking person out there. You know, like, I'm maybe like a 5 or like at the best. So I don't put my picture up in profile pictures. It's going to scare people away, and it'll scare young folks who are interested in this kind of news. I want to make sure that they're not terrified and have nightmares. But to put your profile picture as your face when it looks like this, like this is actually a fairly close comparison here. It's like, that's not good. Like, you're scaring people away, if anything. And so like my message to him, since he apparently does watch our show because he knows that we do voices, rather than anything, don't really care about your content, because it sucks and there's just no recovery to that. But change the profile picture, because he really could benefit from that advice. Like, that would be good advice to work off of and heed very carefully. But anyways,
also by the way, like, just taking a look here, his profile picture really doesn't look like that pig off mine. I'm not gonna lie. I just want to look at it right now. I was like, it literally looks identical. Also, what is that look, man? It looks like he just smelled something foul, like the way he's looking.
Let me go pull him up on the second screen and let me go look at that really quickly. I don't know why we're just roasting.
And also, his hat's kind of racist. I'm not gonna lie. I don't even know what that hat's about, but it's kind of like a racist slogan on the hat there. But I don't even know what the hell that's about. But man, he gets no viewership though. Like, he gets like no viewership. It's crazy.
Man, dude, I'm sitting here looking at the viewership. Jeez. Let's see. Because all of his titles and his thumbnails are just stupid. I mean, they really are. Like, let's see here. Hang on. I would click on the channel. I don't know if a trailer ad's going to play, and I don't want to even hear his voice. The damn fight ranks. But let's see. Also, jeez, dude, I gotta tell you, that profile picture is rough. Like, that is actually rough. Like, I saw it again. I was like, jeez, man. Also, like, dude, I like this title. So-and-so drops emergency warning. You need to hear this. Like, it's like, oh, man, like, that's like that kind of like, man, I don't know how to put it, because this is gonna come off a certain way. But You know what, man? I'm gonna say it. It kind of comes off like that My Pillow kind of business. You know what I mean? Like it's like that kind of like esoteric crap. You know, it's like that kind of deal.
Oh yeah,
Like yeah, it kind of comes off like that. It's like, man, that's just not real news. Like, and the guy's like, man, I talk about news. I talk about what's going on. It's like that's not what's going on, man. It's like,
wait. Also, you're taking my life. Said, is this the same dude that claims he's a famous inventor and was on TV and I'm so special? No, this is not that guy. That's another crazy dude. That's another. He has the same accent, by the way. I think he's from like I think it was like somewhere down south. He's also from like the southern area.
Yeah,
that's right. He's from Texas. He like lives out in a shack in Texas. He's crazy as hell. But we're not going to say the guy's name to give him publicity. But he's another crazy that's attacked the channel too. That was just a lunatic, just going wild. And he was on like some type of TV show or something like that at one point, like 30 years ago, before he went berserko crazy and actually invented something of some note. But he apparently lost his marbles in between then, and he's just on the like berserk crazy crap now. So.
He lives in a small shack. It's like the size of a Home Depot garden shed that you would see out for sale in front of the Home Depot, on the side of the road somewhere in Texas. This other guy that you're talking about does. And what was weird is that he was talking a lot of crap about us, and then one day he just disappeared for like 2 weeks, and then came back and never said anything about us again. I don't know what happened during those 2 weeks, but he just never talked about us again. So I found that a little interesting. Don't know.
That was the same dude. That was the crazy dude right there that came on air and said, I hope they don't see me over their bed at night or something like that. He made some threat like to come stand over our bed or something like that. Like he was going to come break in our house or something like that. And then he got scared after I said, oh, I'm going to like, report you for a threat for that. You're like literally making threats against me. Then he said something along the lines of, I didn't say I was going to stand over your bed. I just said I was going to come look at you. I'm like, what?
It's like that's still breaking and entering. It's like
still committing.
I didn't say I was going to shoot you. I just said I was going to break into your house and touch you. It's like that's still a crime. It's like
if you get pulled over by a cop for speeding, the cop's like, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Yeah, I was speeding. How fast were you going? I was only going 70. Look, I wasn't going 80. And the speed limit's like 50.
Man, dude, he's the kind of guy to sit there and didn't be driving. And then someone said, I can smell some cannabis coming from your car. Please step out. And then they check the car and like they find cannabis in the car. And then he's like, I wasn't going to smoke it. I was just moving it. And it's like, it's still a crime. It's like you still possess. It's like, it's a felony. Yeah, like he's that same kind of a person, man. Like doesn't think like that.
Oh man. I'll tell you what, that was some crazy stuff going on. Like, what was that? Like a year ago, all this stuff was happening or something like that. That was some crazy crap going on with that. I think it actually was a year ago at this point.
No, it was like a year and a half ago or something. It was a long time ago. It was before we even got into law school. Oh yeah, that had to be like 2 years ago.
We had some like lunatics like we were dealing with. I don't even know how we came across these lunatics most of the time. It's just happenstance we ran across these nutcases. But we've seen some dudes. I didn't even know there was crazy people like this on YouTube with a following.
Dude, you know what's crazy, man? Is that this guy, like Matthew said, was on like National Geographic for like 30 seconds. So this guy in his stream will bring that up every 5 minutes. No joke. Like he'll be on the stream, he'll be like, I'll tell you something today, mroe people are coming out of the ground. They're gonna eat all of us. By the way, I was on National Geographic. I created this thing. Look at it. And then he pulled up again. And then he'd show it and he'd be like, yeah, I'm just that smart. I'm a world genius. Anyways.
No, it was Modern Marvels. It was Modern Marvels. That's what it was. He would literally pull up the Modern Marvels clip like every 5 minutes and be like, yeah, you know what? This country's in foul shape. It's in foul shape. But you remember, I was on Modern Marvels about 5 years back.
That was like 20 years ago. It was like 20 years ago because the quality was like from the 90s or something.
Listen, his own audience was literally begging him to stop showing the Modern Marvels clip. They were like, come on, you've already shown it to us 20 times. Stop showing it to us.
Oh my god, killing me, dude! And every dude, and he would sit there and say, "I see a lot of people in the chat asking me to not show it. Y'all just angry at my genius or something like that." He would say something like that.
Oh my god!
Oh my lord! And he'd only have like, what was it, like 120 people watching, and they were all begging. Like the chat activity was through the roof. It was like 120 chats that minute because literally everyone watching would be like, "Please, not again!" And he'd be like, "Hell, you people, I'm showing you again." And he'd show it again. It was just the craziest thing. But yeah, we've sadly we've run into a lot of crazy people. That's probably what's kind of not really made us bitter, but made us a lot more hesitant about being friendly to YouTubers that kind of are in this category, because a lot of them either have a bad side to them that they really don't show in their videos, or they are just downright crazy, like the 3 people that we just brought up right there. It's a little weird like that. And also, some of these people are just not mentally stable. Like some of the people we've dealt with are not mentally stable. Like, you'll talk to them, and then, you know, they go into a crying fit for the whole next day because you just disagreed with them. You know, it's like, that's not really mentally stable. Like, if you can't even handle a disagreement. I mean, you know, I'm fine with people disagreeing with me. You know, they, like, maybe it'll get like a long drawn out argument or something. I'm not going to cry over it for a day. So, you know, that was a little bit of a weird one. But, you know, there's also some cool people who are in the category as well. Civdiv is cool. Also, let me see here. Civdiv is cool. Let's see. Who are some other folks, Matthew, beyond Civdiv that we've had dealings with that are pretty decent?
Let's see here. There's that
Dennis.
drama alert fellow that came on here. There's Dennis that came on. Let's see here. It honestly would probably be easier to like name the ones that we're at odds with, honestly.
yeah, it's a little weird how it's like
You
that.
may start listing them off. Oh man,
but anyways, I hope that addresses that well. We've been on this segment for a good bit, but I hope you've been having a laugh from it, because it's funny to sit there and think about this. And what's even weirder, Matthew, is that all of this is like years ago. This is like now 2 years ago and stuff that most of the stuff happened. But it's a lot easier to tell you all about it now after the fact, because we didn't want to tell you all about most of that stuff while it was actually happening. So it's kind of fun to kind of tell y'all what was actually happening back then that we weren't really bringing up too much. But let's see. Ron
also, we better move on along,
yeah,
my
yeah.
boys. We still got like a good amount of super chats to go.
How many?
About 20.
Oh, okay, yeah. We need to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Barry Woodward, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Barry, for that support. He said, we need a bobcat to look over the LSA flag. Meow, LSA. What the hell, Barry? You're not Duncan. He said, until Putin sleeps for a little while.
And I gotta thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. It would not be a stream without a comment like that. And I gotta thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible and keep it rolling. But maybe so. Maybe we could look into something like that, you know, perhaps. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that does address that the best we can, because hopefully we will be able to have a bobcat to defend the LSA flag. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
Excuse me. And our next one here is going to go to Hokey Redneck once again, who puts in a 20 this time. And thank you very much, Hokey, for the 3rd support of the night. He said, now, how about the AT and SF trains or the Orange Blossom Florida train?
The Orange Blossom Florida train. I actually haven't heard of that one. I don't really know a lot about Florida railroads. Orange Blossom Florida train. Let's see this one. Orange Blossom Special. What company ran this? Oh, Seaboard Airline. I've never heard of this one, actually. I'm not gonna lie, I don't like the livery. That's rough. Like that is rough. But let's see here. Oh, they had a little band out there and everything. Look, Matt, they had a little band when they were getting in Plant City, Florida. I haven't seen this one, but the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe trains were pretty cool. They actually had this one called the Blue Goose, which some people really don't know because the war bonnets of the early Alcos and EMDs really get like all the fame. But the Blue Goose locomotives, or Blue Goose train, maybe. So they don't, hang on, let's just type in the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, because we can find it this way. But the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe was famous because of the war bonnet livery that they came up with for their streamliners, which were these. These are famous. Everyone knows these. Like, even around the world, I'm sure everyone knows these. And, of course, they were made famous because of the Santa Fe Super Chief and also the Santa Fe El Capitan, which were both famous passenger trains that Santa Fe ran. But the Santa Fe was the Santa Fe is actually incredibly cool. It has one of the more interesting railroad histories out there because of where it was regionally inside of the country. It was within the Southwest. So there was a lot of really kind of like Wild West things that happened in their early history, gunfights and stuff with rival companies. It was just incredibly cool. They also had an interesting relationship with the Native Americans and actually were somewhat friendly to them, of course, relative to the time, compared to everyone else in the area. So kind of an interesting thing with that. That's also why the war bonnet it is inspired off of a Native American kind of artistry, if you want to call it that, is because of their relationship with the natives. At least that's how they put it. But beyond that, still pretty cool. Also, Matthew, the Amtrak Superliners that we rode on were inspired because of the Santa Fe high-level cars, like this one right here.
Oh, yeah, it looks somewhat similar, actually.
Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? But still, pretty neat business about Santa Fe. I think Santa Fe was a really cool railroad company. It still lives on to this day in the BNSF, because the BNSF was a merger in between Santa Fe and Burlington Northern, which created Burlington Northern Santa Fe. But let's see here. I want to see if I can find the Blue Goose, but Matthew's letting me know that we are running out of time, and that is true. We are running out of time. But with that, I do thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Andrea Fed, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Andrea, for also supporting the channel. And Andrea said, I've always wondered why the thick blue line on the map around Ukraine ends in Belarus, and you guys are so appreciated by your audience, and you're so good. And thank you, Andrea. And please take one from the chat.
And thank you so much, Andrea, for the kind words. And yes, that is why the blue lines end and begin where they are, because those are the borders that we have in between the CSTO and NATO. But I do thank you so much for the kind words and the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it running day in and day out. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to
wait, we're supposed to get a live chat, yeah.
Yeah, this live chat goes to Samster, who says, do you guys think that Putin could deploy a tactical weapon in Kursk?
Yeah, possibly. I think that it's more possible than any other avenue, but I still think the chances are a little bit low at this point. And so with that, thank you once again for sponsoring that live chat, Andrea Fed, and I hope that does answer that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Flash1, who puts in a 20 as well. Thank you very much, Flash, for that support. It said, hey, Gov, 1,064 days of news and history. Bloody brilliant. And question, please.
And thank you so much for the support. And thank you for enjoying 1,064 days of news. Really crazy to think that we've been on here this long. And really crazy to think that we're about to hit 1,100 days here in about a month from now. That's really bizarre when you think about it. But still, I thank you massively once again for that support and helping this channel to keep on running. And Matthew, did they want us to grab a live chat?
Yes, and the live chat question goes to Illuminatrix. He says, didn't the U.S. president report that over 1 million Ruskies have been KIA?
No, they have not. Their numbers are usually somewhere a little bit below Ukraine's numbers, and neither of those have gotten up to even 1 million wounded and killed combined. So no. And I hope that doesn't.
Governor, he said that Russia has lost at least 800,000. That's what he said, Governor.
800,000 killed and wounded, or 800,000 killed?
800,000, I think, killed, Governor.
That would be higher than Ukraine's number of killed and wounded. And that would mean that Ukraine's underreporting the numbers, which I'd find fairly unlikely.
I think you might be right, Governor.
Yeah, so with that, I hope we addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Alex Street, who puts in a $40 donation, and that is Alex's first ever Super Channel live stream. And big shout out to you, Alex, for choosing to support the channel and to keep us running as well. Because it's viewers just like you, they keep the whole thing literally moving straight forward like a train. But thank you, Alex. He said, this channel is great, and I always learn something. And I think I started listening to you guys sometimes last spring. LSA and Slav Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Alex Street. And I got to say, thank you for enjoying the channel and really throwing in some kind words in your first support ever. And it's really crazy to think you started listening to it last spring. That means you've been listening to it for about a year. And I remember way back in the day, that used to be a really long amount of time. I mean, hell, that was actually all the time you could have watched on the channel, because we were only around for about a year at that point. It's now 3 years down the road. We're about to be moving into the 4th year here. And it's really weird to think that now someone could have watched for an entire year, and they've only been watching for a third of the channel's entire lifespan covering news. But that's really cool to think about, actually. Really neat. And it's really cool to know that you've been along with us for the journey for at least a year nearly at this point. And I got to thank you so much once again for those kind words, and long live the Lee Spring Army and Slav Ukraini. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next donation goes to Baby Bread, who puts in a $15 donation. Thank you very much, Baby Bread, for that support. They said, Chihuahua.
I gotta tell you that this Chihuahua, terrible dog, horrendous dog, we are going to build a wall, not to put out anyone else. We're just going to put out those terrible dogs, stop them from crossing the Rio Grande. I don't even think they can handle crossing the Rio Grande. They cannot handle the trending agua. They would drown. Little shits. Can't stand them. They're little mean bastards. They bite your toes. They hurt really badly. They got these sharp little teeth. And they're really angry. I just don't like them. They're angrier than Rosie O'Donnell. Terrible, angry person. Absolutely terrible. But I gotta tell you something. I absolutely love Ciudad Juarez. Really cool place. Really neat. South of El Paso. Kind of cool like that. But beyond that, thank you once again for supporting and helping this channel to keep on running. And, of course, Chihuahua. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Leora Abigail, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Leora, for also supporting the channel. Once again, this is Pain Forces, pretty crazy stuff. Our new admin just got started. He's on a rampage, and it's only day 3. And I think he is happy to be back and had a plan for a while. He took a big crap on Putin.
And I thank you for the support. As far as his policy on Russia, it really is pretty wild. It's actually wild. It's something I didn't even... I expected it to move this direction. I didn't expect it to move this quick, to put it that way. But it's a very interesting thing for sure. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and making sure that we can make this thing possible and continue to cover the news through multiple different presidential administrations. I'm honestly really shocked at that, man. You think about that. The channel's been around long enough that when we started covering news, it was kind of like beginning the second year kind of the last president's term, and now we're already moving into the first days of the next president. It's kind of weird to think we've lasted long enough that we've made it through an entire presidential term and on to a new president.
Yeah, it's really crazy. We lasted long enough to get around to this guy actually getting around to actually serving, and it's really it's interesting.
I'm gonna put tallow in your French fries. Or something like
We're gonna bring back tallow and make sure it's fries.
And I also gotta say that we're gonna put a bear in the White House so that way I can drag it around and put it in the Rose Garden.
That's right. I forgot to mention that we're gonna bring back the bears and put them in the kitchen.
I gotta tell you, these bears are wild. I just found one in the Rose Garden. Don't know how it got there. It looked like it got hit by...
Put it in the trunk.
It looked like it got hit by an electric scooter. Tesla electric. Very bad, very terrible. We got the Secret Service.
Don't falsely accuse me this time. I didn't hit it with a scooter. I only hit it with a car.
I trust you. I believe that you didn't hit it. But I do have to say...
Thank you.
We're going to have to get the Secret Service onto this, and we're also going to have to get our favorite guy onto the job. Tell us, what do you think of this? I have to say,
oh, no.
Wow, what a crowd.
No.
Something like that.
Oh, what a crowd. Let me throw up this horrible symbol real quick and pretend like I didn't do that.
Look, guys, he's just a little quirky. It's like,
he's just quirky, that's all.
I don't know about that one that time, but...
But those quirky people, no salutes.
All those quirky people. I guess there's this whole weird group of people in Germany in like the 40s that were really quirky. They just kept doing it. Like it was like a whole thing nearly. Like, and then there was this guy, he would get up on a stage and he'd go, "Gestick bei Leitman in die Deutschen." It's like a whole thing. And then he's just quirky. I mean,
I've never seen being somewhat socially awkward cause you to throw up a salute quite like that. Like those socially awkward people these days, they're just getting more extreme.
Oh, he's just throwing his heart out to the crowd. It's like, I don't know. I mean, just kind of looks like something else. I mean, like looking at it in full context, but anyways, I guess you could say I did not see that coming. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here goes to Scott Kemp, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Scott, for that support. He said, Putin is on last legs. Now Siberia is rebelling, and Putin stands today only because the last president would not allow him to get away. Putin is being told he has no choice but to make concessions. Your thoughts?
And I thank you for the support. To be entirely frank with you, this president wouldn't be able to do what he's doing if it wasn't for the last one. That's not to say that this one is inept. It's not to say the last one is inept. Both of them have been working largely at this point, the last one to get the current president to the point where he can pass the baton on to him with the situation we have right now. I would generally say that so far both of them have handled it fairly well, and I think that this is that both of them are largely working in American and Western interests combined. That would be the best approach I can give and the best answer, because not only is it apolitical and not really picking a side, I feel like that's honestly kind of the truth at this point. One of them wouldn't have been able to succeed without the other, vice versa. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And once again, only time will tell how the current president will largely see his plans unfold. Of course, we have to trust that his plan is the best plan. He was elected by the people after all, but we'll have to just see if time tells if this was the right direction, what the current president is doing or not. And hopefully we will be around to see. But that's always the risk with what the last president was doing in this one, is that at some point something might happen and we might not be around to see what really happened. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
Yes, indeed. And our next one here goes to Tom Xman, who puts in a 10. He said, hey, the guys could use some super chats, everyone. Oh, that's okay, Tom. That's okay. But thank you very much for that support and helping keep us running yet again. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say, thank you for wanting folks to send in super chats, but I assure you, it's perfectly fine. People can support the channel if they want to or not. We never want anyone to feel pressured. Also, someone said this. I got to say this, man. He did a copy of the ancient Roman military salute, which was then altered to the Nazi salute. That means it's the Nazi salute. Like in modern days, no one goes, oh yes, the salute of gladiators fighting in the arena. No, when people see that, they go, oh my God, it's Adolf Hitler. Like that's what everyone's going to say.
And also when you draw, if you draw that old-time symbol of old-time Germany, it's not the symbol of good luck like it is in some places around the world. It's known as the Nazi symbol. You don't do that.
Yeah, that's like, look, I looked at it, like, some people were like, oh, he's throwing his heart out at the crowd. No, like, if you, like, I just want to say this, like, not that I, like, watch this a lot, but I saw someone actually show it on Twitter yesterday, funnily enough, but it was a comparison of what he did versus a neo-Nazi rally in America where they also did the Sieg Heil, and it was literally the same thing. Like, you put, let's see, what was it? It was, like, the left hand, you put it over your like right breast, and then you send it outwards, and hold it outright. That's exactly what he did. I mean, like I know a lot of people are like trying to give the benefit of the doubt with that, but I truly do think that guy's letting it go to his head, and he was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny, like, if I did that? Because, like, I would be like Hitler at that point, like, with such a big crowd like this. And, like, that's just, like, that's not the move. Like, like, that's just not the move to do. Like,
people were making it up, honestly, when I heard about it. I had to go look at the video myself. I was like, okay, come on. Like, these headlines are, like, pretty common now. Everybody wants to call everybody a racist or a Nazi or something like that. But when I went to go look at it and I watched it, I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, how are people trying to explain this away? I'm like, it's clear what he did. Like, in my opinion, it was pretty clear what that was. I don't know what his intent behind doing it was, but that's all for sort of subjectivity. But you could tell, like, he put some effort behind it.
He put some gusto into that thing.
Yeah, like, he put some like actual like gusto behind it. It was not just like an accident.
But the thing is with that, and some people are like, he's not a Nazi. He just happened to do it. Like, no, people always take conscious actions. You don't end up being the richest person in the world by happenstance. You did that through deliberate actions to get you to that point. Doing that was a deliberate action. Don't know what for. Like, I don't really think the guy's like a Nazi. But at the same time, it's like that's not really something that you do because you just feel like you want to. Like that's just something that I have to be honest about right there, because it's like if I was at a political rally, I wouldn't be throwing up Sieg Heils. Like, even if I was just saying, oh, it's for the funsies. Like, that's not really something you do, because the Sieg Heils are associated with this whole thing that happened that people really don't like to talk about, and a lot of folks in the United States ended up dying to fight against. So it's something you really don't do unless you're a Nazi or a skinhead. So that's like my mistake. And also some people are like, oh, come on, like, it was just a Roman salute. It's not a Roman salute, it's a Nazi salute. The Nazis kind of took it over and made it their thing. The swastika used to be a sign of peace. You don't see people throwing up swastikas anymore around the place because it's associated with the Nazis. Like if I threw up a swastika, what would y'all do? Would y'all say, oh my God, he's a Nazi? Or would y'all go, oh, well, he's just, using the ancient symbol of peace and love because that's what he used to be? No, y'all would say I'm a Nazi, and that would be right you know, that would be rightfully so. That's what everyone's going to associate the symbol with. So that's my take on it. That wasn't a good thing to do. And also, like, it's not like it's taken out of context, you know, like where it's a picture of someone waving to a crowd and their hands kind of outstretched and they took the picture and they're like, oh, look, they're doing a Sieg Heil. It wasn't that. It was legitimately like the full effort to do it. So it's a very different thing. But anyways, with that, I hope that does kind of address that, at least my opinion on that. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Gabby White, who puts in a 10, and thank you very much, Gabby, for that support. And they said thank you for supporting Ukraine and the LFAD Foundation.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying our the Elite Spring Army's combined support to the Los Angeles Fire Department Foundation, because it was very nice to see. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Glock Glock, who's there once again, who puts in a 10, and thank you very much, Glock, Mr. Glock, for that support. It said, have you ever Googled BOMB, Iran, from 1980?
I think we already had that one before, Matthew, and we have not, but I do know about Operation Praying Mantis. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, also someone said, are you seriously falling for propaganda? Look, man, you can watch the damn video. Like, I'm not meaning to be frank there and just outright. You can watch the video. It's not like it was taken out of context. I mean, it's literally what it was. Like, go look at a rally with the Klan or the neo-Nazis. They do the same thing. Like, it's not like you're taking that out of context there. That's exactly what it was. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Hokey Redneck, who puts in the 10 and says 10 to do Sam.
And I got to thank you so much for the support, and 10 to do Sam. And I got to thank you once again, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. Also, really quickly, one more thing. This is the last time I'm addressing anything. No, me saying that was a certain kind of a salute is not making the political comment. Don't come in here and start making political comments, generalizing entire political parties or groups of people over a certain thing that some person did. That's not what that was about. That was about saying what it looked like, because people had brought it up, and we may as well have mentioned it just for a quick second. Anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next one. This one goes to Marc-Andre Burnett, who's a longtime channel legend as well, and puts in a $6 donation, but does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, Mark, once again, for supporting the channel and helping to keep us running. We also have a 5 from Dustin Mayo, who says, what are your thoughts on the Ukraine military doctor getting arrested?
I didn't hear about that, so I'd largely have to declare ignorance on that one. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
The next one goes to Vulture 1066, who puts in a 5 and says, thanks to Putin, the West is back on.
And thank you once again for the support. And also, can you reread that one, Matthew? Because I don't believe I was understanding that.
I said, thanks to Putin, the West is back on.
The back on phonics. but still, thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep it running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and keep it rolling. And so with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Matthew Carpenter, who puts in a 5 as well, and says, stop if you heard this before, but why didn't the Ukrainians name a body of water after Crimea? Because they don't want a Crimea River. That's a good one.
That's a good one. Crimea River? I don't know. But let me on that, I do have to thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, with folks like you help to make this thing possible and also throw in some pretty good jokes. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to, and let me double check the name real quick, because it was I think I got the spelling all wrong, so let me go check. Let's see here. This one is going to go to Take Miss Sudhide, I believe, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much for the support. They said, for the peace of the world, and this awesome channel as well.
And thank you so much for the support, and hopefully we'll eventually be able to see world peace. It'll just take a lot of war to get there someday. But still, thank you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Long-lasting peace. And this one goes to Burnaby Alex, who puts in a 5 and says, hot dogs made from snow.
Oh man, I lost 1,000 subs. I guess I'm gonna be eating a hot dog made of snow. Oh man. And so with that, I gotta thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. So with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Kyle Padell, who puts in a $5 donation, and it says that they still run the big boy 4014 in Slava LSA.
And they do. It's actually a part of the Union Pacific Heritage Fleet. And I believe the Union Pacific has one of the largest heritage fleets in the country. It's really a point of pride, honestly. And I wish that more companies like CSX and Norfolk Southern and BNSF would have a larger fleet of heritage locomotives that they also ran as well, to once again remind the United States of the pride of our infrastructure and industry that's been such a large part of turning this country into what it was today. Also, another thing, I haven't heard about this. Just a quick note: there's this place in Pennsylvania near Allentown called Bethlehem, and in Bethlehem is the Bethlehem Steel Works, which is one of the biggest ones that used to exist in the country. And I hated to hear the kind of shape it was in. I was actually just found out about it recently and was reading into it. And it's such a big part of American industry and our American industrial history. And it really is just kind of rotting by the train tracks at this point. I would like to see, as an idea for the current administration, that some sort of federal funding was granted for the restoration and the preservation of the site, so that way people can see American industrial history in its full form as it still kind of exists today, and get an idea of what the United States once was and where it's come from to the great heights it's at right now. Because I hate to hear that such a major thing like Bethlehem Steelworks is just sitting there kind of rotting by the tracks. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, speaking of the whole heritage side of things. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also, by the way, the Russians are still going at the U.S. right now. The new leader of the United States, they call him a heroin addict now.
What? What?
Yeah.
When he's not on heroin? When has he ever done heroin?
No, he's never done that. But that's what the Russians are saying. They're calling him a junkie.
Dude, it's like, but that doesn't even stick. It's like you could call Putin a schmuck. He is, but it's like this guy isn't even a heroin addict. It's like you got to come up with something better than that. It's like that's lame. Doesn't even stick.
Yeah, this is crazy, man. Like, honestly, it seems to be what they say about everybody now. They'll say that people in Ukraine are drug addicts and stuff, and there's no evidence whatsoever of that.
Dude, there are Russians high on crocodile in the studio. All these other people, they're just druggies, unlike us. It's like they do heroin, we do crocodile. Totally different. Totally different. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Kyle Padell, who puts in a 5 once again, and says the guy sounds like Boomhauer.
It kind of does when you think about, man, I'm telling you what, man, hell. But still, thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
That's what I sound like if you get around like a big enough tool set. I start sounding like that too. Oh man, hell! I gotta pick up that wrench. Oh yeah,
man.
But anyways,
I'll tell you what, man. We open up that car, man. Look in the hood, you know, trying to damn, you know, something like that.
Oh, but anyways, we're moving on to our next one here, which goes to Plazoth, who puts in a $4 donation and does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, Plazoth, for that support and helping to keep us running. And we also have a $2 donation from Robert Jackson, who said, "Silly Ruskies, Ukraine is for Ukrainians."
Silly rabbit, tricks is for kids, and they're about to learn. America's about to teach them. And America is one of the best teachers in the world. Am I right, Matthew? Dead on the nail. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our last one here goes to Fabian Heftig, who puts in a $1 donation. And thank you very much, Fabian, for that support and also helping to keep us running. But with that, guess what? We are now moving on from our Super Chat questions, and we're now moving on to our live chat questions because it's that time of the night. So once again, thank you to everybody who supported the channel tonight and helped to keep us running. So we're going to jump into our Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schillis, Dave Millsaps, Her Royal Fluffiness, Arabelle Garbo, and Joni Dog. They said the Morse code decipher said the United States is ramping up the pressure tremendously, and let's lay them low. LLT LSA.
And ding, 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 ding. Shh. And that is the sound of money. Y'all got that dead on the nail, and y'all hit it once again. I gotta say, it's really impressive to see that y'all have won out on getting that Morse code message correct for 1,064 days. And hopefully y'all be able to continue to get it correct for quite a while. And so with that, I gotta say, absolutely amazing right there. And I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it's time for us to move on into a couple of live chat questions. I'm going to start it off with one of my own, and then we're going to be getting 3 and rounding out for the night. Someone said, do you eat food? Hitler ate food. I guess there's only one conclusion we can come to. Name one time someone expressed support for Nazism. We never said that, so why are you straw manning? Second off, eating food is totally different than doing a Sieg Heil. No one just does Sieg Heils by habit in the middle of the day. Like when I walk by my neighbor, I don't go, you know, Sieg Heil. I don't do that. Like, that's nothing that you just normally do. You go, oh, hey, what's up? Or something like that. You give them a wave. I just usually don't go around Sieg Heiling people. Eating food? Yeah, sure, everyone did that. But Sieg Heiling people don't really do that a lot. In fact, I've never really done that. So that's kind of the difference, you see, is that Sieg Heiling is something that you kind of got to go out of your way to do. Eating food is something that everyone does every day. And, you know, if you're trying to sit there and say, oh, it's nothing, like, I honestly, man, you got to be eating up some kind of media slop, because I mean, anyone who looks at that for what it was, like, you don't have to sit there and literally read Mein Kampf to then throw up the Sieg Heil and go, oh, there it is. I mean, it's quite obvious. I mean, like I told you, and I'll tell you again, go look at any video of a neo-Nazi rally that's on YouTube and watch them do the Sieg Heil. It's literally the same. And apparently they just got banned. Oh, no. But anyways, with that, I guess some people just are not going to listen. And then they will go on thinking that we drank the Kool-Aid, when I think that they were trying to find some way to justify something that just didn't look good. Because I don't really think there was any other way you could look at that. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, so moving on to our third to last question of the night. This one is going to go to, let's see here. This one goes to Ambrester, who says, have you heard about the troubles brewing in Siberia?
The troubles brewing in Siberia, I haven't really heard a lot about it. I've really not heard a lot about anything going on in Siberia. It seems like nothing's really going on out there, at least from what I've heard. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and this one is going to go to, let's see here. This one goes to Old Warrior, who says, ultimatums can be interpreted as a declaration of war, and will Putin dare?
Oh, no, he would not. That would be suicidal for the Russians. While an ultimatum could be viewed as a declaration of war, we didn't say that we were directly going to conduct military action against them. So this is more so an ultimatum of further consequences, but not really an ultimatum leading to war. So I don't think it will result in a war, although there is a very small chance that it might. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person that threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be Anonymous, who said, given all the U.S. troops and weapons currently in place, what else would the U.S. need to deploy to overwhelm Russia in a conflict?
Reread that one more time.
Given all the U.S. troops and weapons currently in place, what else would the U.S. need to deploy to overwhelm Russia in a conflict?
We generally would have to deploy a much larger contingent of the armed forces into the area, most likely a couple of carrier groups, as well as decent amounts of naval assets to protect maritime shipping. We would also have to send over hundreds of thousands more of the regular army into the area. We'd most likely have to mobilize the Army Reserves and some of the National Guard, and we would also have to make sure to move a larger amount of Air Force assets into the area as well. Generally, we would be moving into a full-time war scenario, so instead of just having the normal amount of troops that we would have in the area, we would be moving in a far larger number rapidly, as quickly as possible. So that generally would be the best answer that I could give. So there would be a lot that would have to be done. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank each and every one of y'all so much once again for watching. This has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to cover this news for each and every single one of y'all tonight. At the peak, there was 10.3 thousand people here, and over the course of the stream, 61,000 people have watched. And of course, we're entirely honored and appreciative to know that each and every one of y'all have gotten your news from this channel tonight and have enjoyed it considerably, hopefully. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, thank you once again for another great stream tonight and a ton of news we covered tonight. Of course, be ready to join us tomorrow midday for the Short War video if there is enough news to cover. Tomorrow will be, I believe, my day for the Short War video, so you'll be hearing from me if there is enough news to cover. And also, if there isn't enough news to cover, you may be getting a surprise video dropped tomorrow of a documentary that I've been working on for about a week now. So that's a possibility. Can't guarantee nothing. If we have enough news for a Short War video, we'll be putting that out first instead. But with that, folks, thank you all for watching. Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava, get some rest, and good night.